Pain is inevitable, a universal part of the human condition, but suffering is a choice. It is a choice that you make moment by moment through the way you respond to that inevitable pain. When you truly master your mind, when you become the sovereign ruler of your inner domain, nothing and nobody can genuinely touch your peace. You become unshakable like a lighthouse, standing firm against the fiercest ocean storm. Insults slide off like water from a duck's back. Loss is met not with collapse, but with surprising resilience and acceptance. Betrayal, instead of shattering you, sharpens your discernment and hardens your resolve. But if you remain vulnerable to the shifting winds of other people's opinions and actions, to the chaotic fluctuations of the external world, you are effectively handing them the power to control your emotions, your state of being, your very experience of life. True invincibility is built within, carefully and deliberately fortified, not granted by the world, and therefore cannot be taken away by it. The crucial question then is this: will you fortify your mind, making it an unassailable inner fortress, or will you continue to surrender it to the relentless storms of life? The choice is yours, and that choice fundamentally changes everything. In the moments to come, we will embark on a journey to learn exactly how to make your mind unbreakable so that nothing external and no one else can truly hurt you again. When you gain command over your thoughts, you become functionally untouchable. Picture this powerful moment. You are standing perfectly firm amidst a raging storm while others are swept away by the gale. You maintain perfect composure even as chaos surrounds you. You smile confidently even as towering challenges mount on every horizon. This is the mental fortress we are talking about. This fortress isn't built in a single heroic day or sudden dramatic realization. It emerges brick by brick, thought by thought, decision by decision, choice by choice. Each deliberate act of internal mastery is another brick laid with intention, until one day you come to the astonishing realization that external circumstances no longer dictate your internal state of being. What once pierced your heart and soul now merely bounces harmlessly off your thickened mental armor. Those who truly master their mind have unlocked the secret to becoming genuinely untouchable. Why does mental control create this profound shield of invulnerability? Because everything in life, every external event, every emotional reaction you experience, every instance of pain or difficulty must first pass through the gateway of your thoughts before it can significantly affect you. Consider this undeniable truth. No person can make you feel inferior without your mental permission. No circumstance can truly devastate you without your active mental cooperation in allowing it to do so. The world's greatest achievers throughout history, from ancient philosophers to modern pioneers, all understood deeply that exerting control over one's thoughts translates directly into gaining profound control over one's destiny. When you consciously decide what information, what opinions, what fears, what narratives are permitted to enter your sacred mental space, and what is barred entry, you are effectively determining what truly influences your life and what becomes irrelevant background noise safely outside your inner sanctuary. So how do you develop this level of mental mastery, this internal sovereignty that renders you essentially untouchable? Start by becoming the vigilant gatekeeper of your thoughts. Stand watch at the entrance to your mind. Examine each idea that attempts entry. Does it serve your highest good? Does it uplift and empower you? Or does it undermine your potential, injecting doubt and negativity? Practice detached observation of negative emotions as they arise, watching them like clouds drifting by without becoming consumed by them without letting them define your state. Dedicate 15 minutes each morning in perfect, deliberate silence, not merely reacting to thoughts, but directing your mental energy deliberately toward your deepest objectives, toward the person you aspire to become, toward the vision you hold for your life. Create crucial psychological distance between a stimulus and your immediate, often habitual response by introducing deliberate pauses. When a challenging situation arises, when a criticism lands, don't react instantaneously. Pause. Breathe deeply. That tiny pause, that space you create, is your access point to freedom and choice. Choose to respond constructively rather than merely reacting destructively. Surround yourself consciously with materials, ideas, and individuals who actively strengthen and reinforce your mental resolve rather than those who passively or actively weaken it through negativity or doubt. Remember, your mind, like any muscle, grows robustly in whatever direction you consistently feed it nourishment and resistance. Choose mental nutrition that actively builds resilience, clarifies purpose, and strengthens your internal foundations. The story of Eunice Waymont offers a powerful illustration of this principle. Born in a small town with dreams vastly bigger than her limiting circumstances, she faced blatant and unjust rejection when attempting to study classical piano purely because of her race. Rather than internalizing this painful discrimination, allowing it to define and crush her, she made the deliberate choice to transform it into powerful fuel for her journey. By controlling her mental response to the systemic injustice, she channeled her immense talents, differently refusing to be limited by external boundaries. This conscious redirection of her inner energy ultimately led her to become one of the most influential and unique musical voices of her generation. When critics attacked her unconventional and powerful style, when venues initially refused to book her performances, when the mainstream industry desperately tried to mold her into something more conventional, more marketable, she remained psychologically untouchable. Her mind, her unique artistic vision belonged to her alone. From that unassailable internal sovereignty flowed her undeniable revolutionary power. Have you ever noticed how two distinctly different people can experience the exact same difficult circumstance? Perhaps losing a job, facing harsh criticism, or dealing with a significant setback, yet emerge from it with completely opposite outcomes. One is crushed and defeated, the other finds strength and a new path forward. What truly separates the person who is crushed by criticism from the one who somehow grows significantly stronger through it? What distinguishes the entrepreneur who collapses after a painful failure from the one who finds the raw materials in those very ruins to build an even greater empire? The fundamental difference lies not in the external forces they faced, which were identical, but in their internal management, their mastery of their mind and response. Are you currently perhaps unconsciously allowing the opinions and actions of other people to easily penetrate your psychological boundaries? Are temporary setbacks, external frustrations, dictating your sense of inherent self-worth and capability? Might your greatest current limitation be the unguarded nature of your thoughts and your unchecked mental habits, rather than the actual external obstacles standing before you? The singular moment you fully comprehend deeply within your being that nothing and no one has true power over you. Absolutely nothing. Except that which you consciously or unconsciously grant through your way of thinking about it. That is the moment when true freedom, inner peace, and unstoppable power truly begin. Your untouchable nature is not something you need to acquire. It already exists, patiently awaiting your recognition and deliberate cultivation. Your emotions cannot break you, they cannot control you when you have deliberately built your emotional shield. Your emotions will continue to arrive like waves upon the shore. Sometimes they will be gentle, comforting ripples. At other times they may arrive as crashing, overwhelming tsunamis of intensity. But their power to genuinely harm you, to derail your life and peace, dissolves completely and utterly when you consciously construct and maintain your emotional shield. Envision this transformative reality. Tears may fall freely, allowing release, but they do not consume or drown you in despair. Anger may rise within you, a powerful energy, but it does not control your actions or consume your rationale. Fear may make an appearance, its physical sensations demanding attention, but it does not paralyze you or dictate your choices. This conscious emotional fortification, this inner shielding, represents the profound difference between living a life entirely at the mercy of your ever-changing feelings versus actively commanding and navigating them with wisdom, intentionality, and purposeful awareness. The emotional shield you build does not and cannot eliminate emotions. That is neither the goal nor the purpose. Instead, it radically transforms your relationship with them. Instead of being tossed helplessly about on stormy emotional seas, buffeted by every passing wave, you become the steady, illuminated lighthouse, standing firm, observing the tempest, understanding its nature, but fundamentally unharmed and unmoved by its force. Those who successfully build this protective internal barrier discover a profound, liberating truth. Feelings can inform you. They can serve as valuable messengers, providing data about your internal state and external interactions. But they do not and should not define who you are or dictate your destiny. Why does cultivating emotional sovereignty create this seemingly impenetrable defense? Because emotions, when left unmanaged, undirected, and misunderstood, become the primary, most effective vehicle through which life's inevitable difficulties inflict their deepest, most lasting wounds. Without your protective shield, simple rejection feels like a crushing blow to confidence. Passing criticism burns away motivation, leaving only cynicism. Momentary disappointment poisons hope for the future, replacing it with pervasive resignation. The most inspiring achievement stories throughout history, the narratives of those who overcame incredible odds, reveal individuals who did not somehow eliminate their emotional responses, rendering themselves cold or robotic. Rather, they learned the art of channeling those powerful emotions productively, using their energy and information constructively towards their goals, rather than allowing them to cause internal destruction or paralyzing inaction. Your inherent capacity to experience the full spectrum of emotion, from joy to sorrow, from excitement to fear, represents one of your greatest human gifts, a rich palette for experiencing the world. But it remains a gift only when it is harnessed, channeled, and understood, rather than merely surrendered to allowing it to pull you wherever it wills. When you establish healthy, conscious boundaries around your emotional life, recognizing that your feelings are transient visitors, not permanent residents, you are essentially determining which feelings genuinely deserve your precious time, attention, and energy, and which merely warrant a moment of quiet acknowledgement before being released to pass on. So how do you construct this vital emotional shield, this inner sanctuary that renders life's inevitable emotional wounds essentially powerless to derail you? Begin by actively recognizing emotions as messengers rather than masters. See them as signals, not commands. Practice the simple but profound act of naming your feelings precisely as they emerge. I am feeling frustration in this moment. I recognize sadness arising. Joy is present here. This act of naming creates immediate, crucial distance between you and the feeling itself. Establish daily rituals and practices that healthily process emotions before they accumulate into an overwhelming dam that threatens to burst. This might include journaling for introspection, engaging in physical movement to release trapped energy, practicing mindfulness or meditation to observe the internal landscape, or engaging in confidential, safe conversations with trusted allies who offer understanding and perspective. Consciously disrupt destructive emotional patterns by introducing deliberate, pre-planned pauses when you feel triggered. Create a go-to mental phrase or physical action that interrupts the automatic cascade. Remember that emotional endurance and resilience are built exactly like physical strength, through consistent, deliberate training, gradual exposure, and healthy processing, rather than through constant avoidance or suppression, which only allows pressure to build. Feed your emotional resilience intentionally through seeking out sources of genuine inspiration, prioritizing sufficient rest for emotional processing and regulation, investing in authentic human connection, and cultivating a consistent practice of gratitude, which radically shifts emotional perspective. Most importantly, practice accepting your emotions without attaching your fundamental identity to them. You feel anger, but you are not an angry person in that moment unless you choose to dwell there. You experience sadness, but you are not sadness itself. The story of Margaret Hendricks provides a compelling example of this mastery. As the first woman appointed to the board of a prestigious financial institution, she immediately encountered vicious, unfounded personal attacks that questioned her capabilities purely based on her gender. Rather than allowing the expected feelings of humiliation, resentment, and frustration to derail her crucial mission, she deliberately crafted and maintained an exceptional emotional shield. When male colleagues deliberately excluded her from critical decision-making meetings, when news outlets scrutinized her personal life relentlessly while ignoring or praising the personal lives of her male counterparts, who often behaved far worse when powerful investors threatened to withdraw significant funding based on outdated, prejudiced beliefs, she maintained unwavering emotional equilibrium and purposeful direction. This wasn't through coldness suppressing feeling entirely or forced detachment. It was through active, conscious mastery of her emotional responses in the moment. Her shield wasn't about feeling nothing. It was about deliberately choosing which feelings deserved her precious energy, attention, and focus, and which could be acknowledged and released without granting them power. Have you noticed certain emotions that seem to consistently derail your progress towards meaningful goals? Perhaps a tendency towards getting bogged down in disappointment, succumbing to excessive worry, or allowing anger to consume your energy unproductively? What possibilities would instantly become available to you if disappointment no longer devastated you for days or weeks on end, but merely informed you for a few insightful moments before you moved forward? Could your current emotional patterns, your habitual reactions to difficult feelings, be deeply ingrained habits rather than unchangeable inevitabilities of your personality? Might your greatest potential triumphs await just beyond those emotional storms, those walls of fear or frustration that you've instinctively been avoiding navigating? Consider this profound possibility. Perhaps your emotional pain persists, seems unending or uncontrollable, not primarily because of genuinely unbearable external circumstances, but because of a less conscious internal permission. You are still granting for those emotions to control you. The uncomfortable truth remains that emotions themselves in their raw form cause far less damage than our undisciplined reactive responses to them. Your capacity for an unshakable nature for profound inner peace doesn't require emotional elimination, attempting the impossible feat of feeling nothing. It requires emotional integration, wise understanding, and masterful navigation. When you grasp at a fundamental level that your emotions can vastly enrich your experience of being human without controlling the fundamental direction of your life, that is when genuine, radical emotional freedom truly emerges. Your powerful emotional shield is not something bestowed upon you. It patiently awaits your conscious, deliberate construction, one intentional response at a time. Transform every pain into your greatest power. Your deepest wounds, your most challenging setbacks, your moments of significant suffering contain within them the potent seeds of your most extraordinary, most defining strengths. This power is unlocked when you master the ancient and profound alchemy of transforming the raw material of pain into tangible, purposeful power. Imagine this remarkable inner transformation taking place within you. Betrayal, the source of sharp pain, becomes elevated into acute discernment, allowing you to judge character and navigate relationships more wisely in the future. Rejection. A blow to the ego breeds powerful self-reliance and fierce independence. Failure, often perceived as a terminal ending, cultivates deep-seated wisdom and strategic learning. And loss, a source of profound sorrow, ultimately generates a fierce, beautiful appreciation for presence, connection, and life itself that those who haven't experienced loss simply cannot comprehend. This remarkable alchemical conversion of suffering into strength does not happen automatically by chance or merely over time. It emerges specifically and reliably through deliberate mental reframing, consciously changing your perspective on the event, through actively asking better, more empowering questions about the experience, through rigorously extracting the lessons buried within the suffering, until one day you look back and realize that the very experiences, the very forces that seemed explicitly designed to destroy you, to break your spirit, have instead uniquely distinguished you, forging a character unlike any other. What once fundamentally threatened to break you now, paradoxically, builds your most unique, resilient, and valuable competitive advantage in life. Those who master this inner transformation discover a liberating, fearless truth. They no longer primarily fear life's inevitable difficulties because they have acquired the indispensable skill of mining those challenges for hidden treasures, for strength, wisdom, and growth opportunities that comfort could never provide. Why does pain, in its seemingly negative form, carry within it this potential for generating such extraordinary positive power? Because hardship and challenge create pressure. And pressure, when properly understood, directed, and harnessed, produces radiant diamonds from raw coal. The world's most impactful revolutionary individuals, those who reshaped industries and inspired millions, did not succeed despite their suffering. They frequently succeeded remarkably because of how skillfully they transmuted that suffering, processing it, learning from it, and directing its powerful energy towards creation rather than capitulation. Your painful experiences contain intensely concentrated lessons. Truths about yourself, others, and the world. Lessons that are simply unavailable through comfortable, easy circumstances. They stress test your character in profound ways, revealing both the weaknesses within your psychological and emotional structure that desperately need reinforcement and the hidden dormant strengths that are patiently awaiting deployment and recognition. Most significantly, perhaps pain creates the stark contrast necessary to fully recognize, appreciate, and savor triumph, peace, and joy. Without the experience of genuine darkness, how could you ever fully, authentically comprehend the nature of light? When you reinterpret suffering not as an arbitrary punishment inflicted upon you, but as a valuable, albeit painful, investment in your own growth and future capacity, you unlock immense stores of energy previously trapped and bound up in futile resentment, bitter regret, or paralyzing victimhood. So, how specifically do you perform this remarkable act of inner alchemy, this transformation from an open wound to deep wisdom? Start by consciously abandoning the futile, often self-pitying "why me?" question in favor of the empowering, action-oriented question, "what now?" Immediately shift your focus from analyzing the injustice of the situation to discerning the necessary next step. Thoroughly, almost clinically examine painful situations for their inherent educational value. Ask, what does this difficulty specifically reveal about me? What does it show me about human nature or others? What universal life principles are being illuminated here, perhaps uncomfortably? Practice conscious reframing. Actively challenge your initial negative interpretation. Ask deliberately how this challenge might, in a broader, longer-term view, serve your ultimate objective, rather than hinder it. Extract the often hidden gift within each hardship. Perhaps it is increased resilience under pressure, deeper empathy born from shared experience, or a powerful clarity about what genuinely matters in your life, winnowed down by trial. Create deep meaning from suffering by channeling the energy and insights it provides toward purposeful service to others who are currently facing similar trials. Share your hard-won lessons, offer support from a place of understanding. Remember, this crucial truth pain transforms into potent power most effectively and reliably when its energy is channeled toward a purpose larger and more significant than yourself. Most importantly, and requiring consistent discipline, refuse to grant permanent residence within your mental and emotional landscape to temporary painful emotions. Feel them, learn from them, but do not build a home for them inside you. The story of Takeo Fukui provides another inspiring testament to this power. Bound from birth to extreme poverty and burdened with significant physical limitations that might cause others to surrender to circumstance, conventional wisdom predicted extremely limited prospects for him. Rather than internalizing these crushing external limitations as inherent personal inadequacy, he made the deliberate ongoing choice to systematically convert each barrier he encountered into a crucial building block for his ascent. When esteemed educational institutions unfairly rejected his applications despite his truly exceptional scores and clear intellect, when potential employers dismissed his capabilities based on appearance and prejudice rather than demonstrable merit, when relentless financial constraints threatened to choke off his capacity for innovative thinking, he transformed these seemingly insurmountable rejections into resolute self-reliance and unwavering determination. The discrimination that might justifiably have embittered and hardened a lesser spirit instead paradoxically inspired revolutionary engineering designs specifically intended to accommodate diverse physical abilities, leveraging his own experience to benefit others. His groundbreaking engineering achievements, which ultimately transformed transportation accessibility for millions globally, emerged directly from processing and responding creatively to his personal limitations. His pain didn't just produce personal power for himself, it was alchemized into widespread progress and liberation for humanity. Are you currently viewing certain painful experiences in your own life purely and simply as crushing obstacles, forces designed against you, rather than as difficult but fertile opportunities for growth and transformation? What unexamined wounds, what past hardships might currently contain reservoirs of wisdom and strength you have not yet actively extracted? Could your most significant, most painful setback, potentially with proper interpretation and courageous reframing, become your single most defining and powerful advantage in life? Might your present difficulties, the struggles you face right now, be perfectly designed and calibrated to develop precisely the resilience, the wisdom, the creative problem-solving capacity that is absolutely required for your next level of achievement, for the next important phase of your journey. Consider this perspective-shifting possibility. Perhaps your most painful experiences, those moments of deep suffering, are not punishments arbitrarily inflicted upon you, but indispensable preparations, blacksmith's fires forging the strength you will inevitably need. The capacity to transform the inevitable reality of pain into personal power is what fundamentally distinguishes those who merely endure life's challenges from those who consciously, actively conquer them. Your hardships, the weights you've lifted, do not diminish your potential. On the contrary, when properly processed, understood, and transmuted, they dramatically, exponentially expand it. When you fully comprehend, not just intellectually but in your gut, that pain is fundamentally raw material awaiting courageous conversion rather than a final sentence delivered without purpose, that is when genuine transformation truly begins releasing trapped energy into potent forward momentum. Your greatest power awaits patiently, courageously within your deepest pain. Unbreakable confidence comes from within. Your confidence, that deep-seated belief in yourself and your capabilities, becomes absolutely unshakable, unassailable, when it is consciously built upon solid internal foundations rather than fragile, constantly shifting external validation. Picture this secure reality presenting your boldest, most authentic ideas to the world, without the desperate need for external approval, pursuing your most ambitious goals with conviction. Despite skepticism and doubt from others, maintaining your unwavering self-belief even when subjected to harsh or unfounded criticism, and having the inner strength and clarity to calmly walk away from toxic situations, environments, or relationships without descending into self-doubt or regret. This kind of unwavering internal self-assurance does not magically spring from arrogance, misplaced superiority, or blind delusion. It emerges organically and powerfully from deep, intimate self-acknowledgement, from honestly recognizing your inherent value, your intrinsic worth as a human being, completely separate from your external accomplishments, possessions, or titles. It comes from consistently honoring the commitments and promises you make to yourself with the same level of seriousness and dedication that you give to promises made to others. What once required constant external reinforcement, the applause of others, positive feedback, visible proof of success, now flows naturally, sustainably, and reliably from within you. Those who successfully cultivate this kind of deep internal confidence discover an astonishingly liberating truth. They no longer live as hostages to the fleeting evaluations or ever-changing opinions of others, because they have deliberately established their own fixed, unshakable internal standard for measuring their worth and progress. Why does internally generated confidence rooted in self-knowledge and self-trust provide this profound bulletproof protection against external doubt and criticism? Because confidence that is built precariously upon external validation remains perpetually vulnerable to the myriad outside forces that are fundamentally beyond your control. An economy can tank, a relationship can fail, a critic can attack, and if your confidence relies on external conditions, it collapses with them. The most compelling leadership examples throughout history, the figures who changed the world against incredible odds, revealed not just strategic genius or charisma, but demonstrated unwavering, almost radical self-belief, despite often facing intense initial public skepticism, outright ridicule, or staunch institutional resistance. Your inherent capacity to truly trust yourself, your instincts, your judgment, and your worth represents the absolute foundational cornerstone upon which all other aspects of success and a meaningful life ultimately rise or tragically fall. When your fundamental sense of self-worth emanates from a secure place, within, rather than being sought frantically from without, rejection significantly loses its sharp sting. External criticism becomes merely potential information to be evaluated calmly, not reacted to emotionally, and failure transforms from a defining terminal event into an illuminating educational experience. Most crucially, internal confidence creates the profound moral courage necessary to maintain unwavering integrity and commitment to your deepest values, even and especially when compromise, bending your principles, or giving in to external pressure would appear much easier or more expedient in the short term. So how do you develop this robust, unbreakable internal confidence, this inner anchor that sustains you powerfully regardless of unpredictable external circumstance? Begin by conducting a thorough, honest, and compassionate personal inventory. Identify your strengths without false modesty or downplaying them. Acknowledge them honestly. Simultaneously, identify your weaknesses or areas for growth without harsh self-judgment, seeing them merely as opportunities for learning and development. Practice conscientious, deliberate self-care, actively treating yourself with the same level of consideration, kindness, and understanding that you would naturally offer to a deeply valued friend in need. Establish a robust, non-negotiable personal integrity system where the promises and commitments you make to yourself hold absolutely equal importance and gravity to the commitments you make to others. When you consistently keep your promises to yourself, even small ones, your self-trust grows exponentially. Actively document your victories, both the grand, outwardly visible accomplishments and the quiet, unseen small wins and moments of courageous effort. Cultivate concrete, tangible evidence that directly counters the voice of self-doubt when it arises. Deliberately seek out challenges that are slightly noticeably beyond your current perceived capabilities. Tasks that require you to stretch, learn, and adapt. Then celebrate your growth effort and learning regardless of the immediate outcome. Remember, confidence, precisely like any physical muscle, strengthens significantly through consistent resistance training, through deliberately lifting challenging weights, metaphorically speaking, rather than through effortless, comfortable repetition. Actively feed your self-belief daily through deliberate practices using powerful, positive affirmations, engaging in clear visualization of successful outcomes, and regularly engaging in evidence-based reflection on your past moments of competence, courage, and overcoming challenges. The story of Solomon Kiki serves as a powerful case study in internally cultivated confidence. Despite possessing truly extraordinary academic potential, educational opportunities were severely limited for him by pervasive economic and social barriers, external conditions seemingly beyond his control. Rather than internalizing these severe external limitations as inherent personal inadequacy or proof that he wasn't good enough, he made the conscious, sustained choice to cultivate unshakable self-belief rooted in his inner capabilities. When prestigious institutions initially and unfairly rejected his applications, despite his exceptional intellect and scores, when colleagues unjustly questioned his qualifications and suitability purely based on his humble background rather than his demonstrable merit, when relentless financial constraints threatened the continuity and feasibility of his critical research work, his fundamental confidence never wavered. This was not through blind, baseless positivity, but through clear-eyed, accurate self-acknowledgement. A deep, inner knowing. He accurately recognized capabilities within himself that others had not yet witnessed or validated externally, and he persisted relentlessly day after day, step after step, fueled by that inner conviction, until his groundbreaking agricultural innovations profoundly transformed regional food security for millions. His confidence was not loud, boastful, or attention-seeking. It manifested as a quiet, powerful, consistent self-trust, an internal anchor operating silently and powerfully within him, despite overwhelming external doubt and skepticism directed his way. Have you noticed certain specific situations, certain types of interactions, or certain external reactions that seem to consistently undermine your confidence, causing it to falter or recede? What genuinely empowering possibilities might emerge in your life, professionally, personally, and creatively, if your fundamental self-belief no longer required constant, often exhausting, external reinforcement from others? Could your greatest current confidence challenges actually stem from your tendency to seek crucial validation from sources, people, institutions, metrics, that are fundamentally incapable of truly understanding or accurately evaluating your unique vision, potential, or worth? Might your most authentic, most fulfilling achievements be patiently awaiting you just beyond those approval-seeking patterns, those external validations loops, that are currently subtly but significantly limiting your boldest expressions of self and talent? Consider this profound reality. Perhaps your struggles with confidence persist, seem difficult to overcome, not fundamentally because you are inherently lacking in some way, but specifically because you are looking actively outward for something, true lasting self-belief, that can only be authentically generated and fortified from deep within. The liberating truth remains that truly sustainable, unwavering confidence cannot fundamentally be given to you by others, nor can it truly be taken away by them. It must be consciously, deliberately, and consistently cultivated, nurtured, and fiercely protected from your inner core. Your journey towards an unshakable nature, towards inner freedom, doesn't ultimately require universal approval or validation from every person you encounter. It requires and is built upon unwavering, courageous self-trust. When you grasp fully and truly that confidence is ultimately a choice. You make a state you cultivate rather than a fickle circumstance dictated by external events or others' opinions. That is when genuine inner liberation begins to unfold. Your robust, unbreakable confidence patiently awaits your recognition, your cultivation, and your trust. Master your reply to master your life. Your complete and lasting liberation, your ultimate freedom, fundamentally emerges not from successfully controlling the unpredictable, uncontrollable forces of the external world, but when you profoundly master your response to those forces. Envision this radical internal mastery maintaining perfect, unshakable peace and clarity amidst outward chaos, converting perceived obstacles into undeniable opportunities for growth and innovation, finding unexpected humor and light even during the most challenging and painful hardships, and generating unexpected value, creating something meaningful and worthwhile even from situations that others dismiss as utterly worthless or defining failures. This kind of profound response sovereignty does not by any means suggest or require pretending that difficulties don't exist or ignoring genuine problems. It means consciously developing such complete command, such deep awareness and intentionality over your immediate habitual reactions that you consistently, almost automatically extract advantage, learning wisdom, or creative solutions from any circumstance that life, fate, or others present to you. What once automatically appeared as overwhelming, insurmountable problems, sources of stress and despair, now register in your perfected inner landscape merely as interesting challenges, intriguing puzzles fully worthy of your calm, creative engagement and strategic problem-solving capacity. Those who successfully achieve this high level of response mastery discover an extraordinary, liberating truth. They no longer need to exhaust themselves trying to rigidly control unpredictable external conditions because they have profoundly mastered control over their internal condition, their own state of being. Why does cultivating response mastery create this unparalleled freedom and resilience? Because while external circumstances, people's actions, global events, and sudden misfortunes remain fundamentally outside your absolute jurisdiction and control, your conscious, intentional responses to these things remain perpetually and entirely within your domain of choice and power. History's most consequential figures, those who steered nations, pioneered industries, or inspired movements, demonstrated not immunity from encountering immense difficulties, setbacks, and opposition, but consistently exhibited a remarkable capacity to consciously fashion constructive, purposeful responses to them. Your innate power to consciously choose your reactions, rather than simply succumbing automatically to ingrained reflexes or impulsive emotional reactions, represents your single most decisive and powerful advantage in any given situation, in any context. When you consciously cultivate intentional, considered responses, rather than simply defaulting to automatic, often unproductive reactions, setbacks become merely temporary detours or pauses, rather than terminal, unavoidable endings. Criticism becomes useful or irrelevant information to be evaluated calmly, rather than a destructive attack on your being. And failures are reframed and absorbed as invaluable educational experiences, rather than defining declarations of your permanent inadequacy. Most significantly, developing response sovereignty prevents chaotic external forces from hijacking or unilaterally determining your fundamental internal state of being, your mood, or your sense of self-worth. Your state becomes internally generated, independent of external validation or challenge. So how do you deliberately develop this crucial response mastery? This inner alchemy that transforms every external challenge, no matter how daunting, into a profound internal victory, a testament to your strength. Start by deliberately, consistently creating space and psychological space between an external stimulus and your immediate automatic response. This momentary pause, this conscious beat, is what permits a deliberate choice rather than a mere, often unconscious compulsion to react instinctively. Practice consciously reframing adverse situations by intentionally seeking out and adopting alternative perspectives. Ask yourself what unexpected opportunities might secretly exist within this apparent problem. Develop the habit of asking yourself automatic redirection questions during moments of difficulty or unexpected challenge. Questions like, what can I learn from this situation right now? Or, how might I intentionally use this unexpected development to my advantage or to further my purpose? Strengthen your contextual awareness by regularly zooming outward mentally from the immediate, often emotionally charged circumstances to view broader patterns, deeper principles, and your ultimate long-term purposes. Remember that the response muscles within you, precisely like physical muscles, develop undeniable strength and flexibility through consistent, challenging resistance training. Consciously practicing different responses to difficult situations, rather than merely comfortable, easy repetition of old familiar habits. Actively feed your response sovereignty by studying deeply how history's greatest achievers, the individuals who redefined what was possible, consistently converted crushing defeats, seemingly impossible odds, and relentless opposition into defining lasting victories, not by controlling the external, but by mastering their internal engagement with it. Victoria Woodhull, faced with what appeared to be seemingly impenetrable barriers to her participation and success in male-dominated financial markets, built an extraordinary conscious response mastery. When long-established institutions deliberately and unfairly rejected her participation, despite her clearly demonstrated aptitude and competence, when relentless media attacks targeted her character and personal life rather than engaging with her revolutionary ideas, when complex regulatory obstacles deliberately threatened her innovative approaches and existence in the marketplace, she steadfastly refused the easy, often unproductive route of reactive indignation, self-pity, or external blame. Instead, she consistently opted for strategic recalibration and creative circumvention. Rather than exhausting her finite energy, primarily fighting head-on against the very systems designed against her success, a battle she was structurally disadvantaged in, she made the deliberate choice to redirect that energy into creating entirely parallel structures, innovative new pathways, and alternative marketplaces that eventually profoundly transformed the very industry and marketplace that had initially unfairly excluded her. Her hard-won response sovereignty wasn't about passive acceptance of injustice. It was about dynamic, strategic redirection of her efforts and internal state. Her formidable strength manifested not in somehow controlling unchangeable circumstances and entrenched biases, but in expertly powerfully controlling her engagement with them, her chosen field of battle, and her internal narrative about the situation. Are you currently, perhaps unconsciously, expending significant precious energy, trying tirelessly to change immovable, entrenched external conditions, biases, systemic challenges, other people's fixed minds, rather than wisely mastering and optimizing your conscious response to them? What radically new possibilities might immediately emerge in your life and work if you deliberately redirected that same intensity, that same frustrated energy towards cultivating true, unassailable internal sovereignty? Your thoughts, your emotions, your responses, your peace. Could your greatest current frustrations and sources of stress actually represent brilliantly disguised opportunities specifically placed in your path for you to demonstrate, develop, and perfect your creative response muscles and strategic internal redirection capacity? Might your most significant future achievements and breakthroughs be patiently awaiting you just beyond those current response barriers that currently register to your perception as overwhelming? Uncontrollable external obstacles. Consider this fundamental liberating shift in perspective. Perhaps your circumstances appear profoundly limiting, not fundamentally because of their inherent objective nature or severity, but specifically because of your long-established, often unconscious, habitual reactions to them. The profound truth remains that external conditions, other people's actions, and sudden misfortunes hold power over your experience, over your peace and trajectory, only precisely to the extent that you grant them power actively or passively through your own unmanaged reactive responses. Your journey towards ultimate liberation begins decisively with reclaiming ownership and conscious control over your response. When you fully comprehend with deep intuitive understanding that external circumstances on their own do not ultimately determine your destiny, they merely reliably reveal your existing response patterns. That is when genuine radical mastery and profound freedom truly begin. Your inherent sovereignty patiently awaits your conscious recognition and courageous claim. Daily decisions determine your destination. Your life's entire trajectory, your ultimate destination, your accumulated outcomes are not fundamentally shaped by a handful of rare, occasional, monumental choices that everyone notices. They are shaped, sculpted, and overwhelmingly predetermined by the consistent, often unseen daily decisions. You make hour by hour, choice by choice, especially when nobody is watching, when the stakes feel small, when it seems like it doesn't really matter. Visualize this immense cumulative power of daily decisions, the principle of compounding applied relentlessly to your life. Small, seemingly insignificant daily disciplines, maintained consistently accumulating over months and years into towering, remarkable achievements that seem impossible to others. Minor habitual daily compromises taken repeatedly when nobody's looking, slowly deteriorating over time into major character flaws, loss of integrity, or missed opportunities that seem inexplicable in hindsight. Tiny, deliberate daily improvements, small acts of courage or learning, snowballing irresistibly over time into transformative, undeniable progress and mastery that separates you from the masses. This subtle, powerful decision architecture doesn't announce itself dramatically with fanfare or flashing lights. It operates quietly, often invisibly, reliably, repeatedly weaving the fabric of your future reality, moment by moment, choice by choice, diligently building the path to your inevitable destination while you remain barely conscious of its profound construction. What initially appears to the world or even to yourself as sudden overnight success or sudden unexpected failure actually reliably represents the inevitable, mathematically predictable outcome of literally thousands upon thousands of seemingly insignificant accumulated daily decisions and choices made consistently over time. Those who cultivate awareness and mastery over this subtle decision architecture discover an empowering and almost unfair truth. They ultimately do not need to desperately, tiresomely control external circumstances or fight against unpredictable external forces, because they have profoundly mastered the countless small choices and decisions that govern and optimize their thoughtful, intentional response to any circumstance, no matter how unexpected or difficult. Why do these seemingly minor daily decisions carry such extraordinary destiny-shaping power? Because life fundamentally follows the unforgiving principle of compound interest, applied not just to finances, but relentlessly to your character, your habits, your skills, and your capability. History's most remarkable, most impactful achievers rarely, if ever, possessed some truly unusual, superhuman innate talent compared to their peers. Instead, they consistently demonstrated an unusual, often overlooked consistency in their deliberate, often boring daily decision-making habits and patterns. Your countless, seemingly minor automatic daily choices determine your critical information diet. What thoughts, ideas, and perspectives enter your mind consistently? They determine the genuine quality of your most important relationships, the small acts of kindness or neglect. They dictate your long-term health trajectory, the repeated choices of food and movement, and they ultimately predictably determine your opportunity landscape, the results of consistent learning effort and relationship investment. When you truly recognize with deep intuitive understanding that decisions do not merely add up linearly, but instead compound over time, like money in a savings account growing with interest, suddenly those seemingly small choices regarding personal integrity, those minimal daily learning investments, those quiet moments of consistent self-disciplined effort take on monumental, undeniable significance. Most crucially, consciously cultivated decision sovereignty, taking ownership of your daily choices, prevents unpredictable external influences and momentary fleeting desires from hijacking your long-term trajectory through the powerful force of unconscious detrimental habit formation. So how do you effectively harness this subtle but immense decision power to deliberately design and steer your destiny? Start by conducting a thorough, honest decision audit of your life right now. Identify the top 5 daily decisions you currently make most consistently that are demonstrably shaping your future. Identify those shaping it both powerfully positively and subtly negatively. Practice active decision consciousness by deliberately creating environmental triggers or internal cues that promote a moment of mindful awareness, a pause before you engage in an habitual or automatic action or reaction. Establish powerful, non-negotiable daily disciplines, small, consistent routines that firmly anchor your highest priorities and deepest values into concrete action, regardless of convenience, immediate difficulty, or fluctuating mood. Deliberately engineer your physical spaces, your daily routines, and your social circles to make the path towards making superior decisions feel natural, effortless, and almost automatic, requiring far less reliance on constant willpower or momentary motivation, which are finite resources. Remember again that decision muscles like physical ones gain indispensable strength and stamina through consistent intentional exercise, repeatedly choosing the slightly harder but more aligned path in small moments, not through occasional grand heroic efforts that are unsustainable. Actively feed your decision-making quality and intuition by deeply studying how history's most consequential, most successful contributors, individuals who achieved monumental feats, consistently structured their daily choices and priorities in ways that virtually guaranteed their eventual remarkable success, regardless of overwhelming initial obstacles or unpredictable motivational fluctuations. The story of Raymond Tomlinson provides a compelling example. While many of his equally brilliant engineering contemporaries sought revolutionary technological breakthroughs, complex, exciting problems with immediate fame potential, he instead focused diligently, almost monomaniacally, on making excellent, reliable daily decisions regarding seemingly mundane communication problems, the fundamental architecture of sending messages. When exciting, high-profile research projects consistently tempted his attention away from the foundational, unglamorous challenges of fundamental connectivity and messaging protocols, when brilliant colleagues dismissed his quiet, focused interest in basic message transmission as lacking the glamour and intellectual excitement of more theoretical or futuristic pursuits. When clear financial incentives aggressively pulled him towards more commercially obvious and lucrative applications of his talents, his underlying decision discipline regarding where to focus his energy never wavered. Not through dramatic, loud declarations of intent, but through the quiet, powerful consistency of his daily choices, reliably allocating his finest thinking hours to solving the essential necessary problems rather than the merely impressive or attention-grabbing ones. His underlying decision architecture was not flashy, loud, or outwardly attention-seeking. It manifested instead as a quiet, persistent, almost relentless prioritization of fundamental foundation-building work, the plumbing of the internet that ultimately predictably revolutionized global communication infrastructure and irrevocably changed the way humanity interacts. Are you currently celebrating or perhaps waiting for occasional heroic dramatic efforts, grand gestures of intent or bursts of intense motivation, while perhaps neglecting or underestimating the cumulative power of the seemingly insignificant repetitive daily decisions that are in reality most reliably determining your long-term trajectory and outcomes? What genuine possibilities, what transformative shifts might immediately emerge in your life if you deliberately redirected your focus, your energy, and your intention away from waiting for dramatic external results, and instead consciously prioritized cultivating consistent, high-quality, daily decision-making as the primary metric of progress? Could your greatest current frustrations or sources of stagnant outcomes actually reflect the negative compound interest accumulating from countless previous poor or unaligned daily decisions, rather than simply being solely due to your present circumstances, bad luck, or external forces? Might your most desired, most meaningful achievements, those goals that currently feel distant or unattainable, be patiently awaiting you, not requiring a single monumental leap, but merely located just beyond a critical series of seemingly insignificant, often boring but consistently aligned and purposeful daily choices? Consider this fundamental paradigm shift in how life actually operates. Perhaps success, genuine fulfillment, and meaningful progress appear elusive or difficult to grasp, not fundamentally because you inherently lack some necessary innate quality, talent, or resource, but primarily because you have deeply critically underestimated how thoroughly and reliably your consistent, daily decisions quietly shape, steer, and ultimately predetermine your destiny. The profound truth remains that external circumstances and inherent talents only significantly influence your outcomes, primarily up to the point where deliberate strategic decision mastery allows you to consistently choose reactions and actions that create superior outcomes regardless of the initial hand you are dealt. Your powerful journey towards destiny ownership and control begins decisively with reclaiming ownership and conscious control over your daily decisions. When you fully comprehend with deep embodied understanding that your life does not simply passively happen to you, but rather reliably and predictably emerges from these thousands of seemingly minor yet powerfully compounding daily choices you make, that is when genuine, profound, and sustainable empowerment truly begins to activate within you. Your extraordinary designed destiny patiently awaits your conscious, intentional daily decisions. Your thoughts create your reality. Your entire conscious experience of life, the texture, quality, and nature of your reality, flows directly, inescapably, and reliably from the quality and the direction of your dominant thinking patterns and deeply held beliefs. Envision this powerful, inescapable causality. Expectations, conscious or unconscious, consistently becoming actual experiences, reliably filtering what you see and how you act. Assumptions held often without critical examination, effortlessly transforming over time into deeply ingrained perceptions, coloring every interaction. Beliefs formed often early in life or absorbed from your environment, manifesting directly and inevitably as consistent behaviors and self-fulfilling prophecies. And abstract thoughts held repeatedly, deliberately, or habitually, subtly, but powerfully crystallizing over time into tangible circumstances and lived realities. This profound thought-reality connection does not operate through mystical woo-woo or magical means divorced from understand reality. Instead, it operates through deep psychological principles and eminently practical mechanisms. Your thoughts, your internal dialogue, and your core beliefs powerfully shape how you instinctively interpret the events you encounter. They determine what opportunities you are even capable of recognizing amidst apparent chaos or challenge. They influence which actions you consider remotely possible for someone like you, subtly setting unconscious boundaries. And ultimately, through this process, they profoundly influence and determine what measurable results you are actually capable of achieving and sustaining over time. What once instinctively appeared to you as purely random, unpredictable, or unfair external events dictated by luck or forces beyond your control increasingly reveals itself through the lens of this understanding as the natural, often predictable outgrowth of your internal mental activity and deeply ingrained interpretive habits. Those who consciously and successfully master their dominant thought patterns and core beliefs discover a transformative, liberating truth. They realize they do not need to constantly battle fiercely against difficult external conditions, tirelessly trying to control people and circumstances that are fundamentally uncontrollable. Why? Because they have learned the far more powerful and effective skill of addressing the influence and impact of those external conditions at their ultimate source, within their own minds. Why do thoughts often seemingly ethereal and intangible wield this fundamental, powerful reality-creating power? Because your mind functions simultaneously as both a crucial filter and an active projector of reality. As a filter, it selectively determines what vast amounts of incoming sensory information you consciously notice and focus upon from the world around you. As a projector, it colors, shapes, and assigns meaning to everything you then proceed to experience and how you react to it based on your existing internal framework of thoughts, beliefs, and assumptions. Historical analysis of extraordinary achievers, those who transcended apparent limits and shaped history, reliably reveals not individuals who were simply handed unusually favorable circumstances compared to their peers. Instead, it consistently reveals individuals who held unusually effective, empowering thought patterns and beliefs about the common circumstances that everyone else was also facing. Your consistent mental activity, your focus, your interpretation, your beliefs, determines which pieces of information receive your valuable attention and mental energy. It dictates what meaning, often a subjective narrative, gets automatically assigned to the events that occur in your life. It strongly influences which potential responses and courses of action seem plausible or available to you in a given situation, subconsciously limiting or expanding your options. And ultimately, your internal thought patterns significantly determine the level of persistence, effort, and belief that appears warranted or even possible when faced with obstacles, thus directly influencing your ultimate outcome. When you consciously recognize deeply and fundamentally that your mindset and thinking patterns operate as the active filter and shaper of your reality, rather than just a passive, neutral reflection of some fixed external truth, suddenly cultivating mindful mental management transforms from optional self-improvement, something nice to consider, into absolutely essential life navigation and the primary means of steering your experience. Most significantly, developing thought mastery consciously prevents external circumstances, other people's fixed ideas or societal limitations from unilaterally controlling or limiting your internal condition and your possibility landscape, not because the external factors disappear, but because you take conscious ownership of your interpretive and reactive habits, replacing automatic disempowering responses with intentional empowering ones. So how do you effectively harness these powerful, often unconscious thought patterns to deliberately, actively, and consciously design and influence the nature of your lived reality? Begin by conducting a thorough, honest thought inventory of your dominant mental landscape. Identify your recurring habitual mental patterns, those streams of thought that flow most consistently through your mind. Critically examine how these patterns are currently in real time, both creating empowerment and enabling potential and simultaneously establishing artificial self-imposed limitations in your daily experience. Practice deliberate thought consciousness through regular scheduled intervals of quiet, non-judgmental mental observation. Sit and simply watch your thoughts flow by noticing their themes, their tone, their intensity without immediately trying to change them or identify with them. This creates separation. Actively establish specific concrete replacement patterns for habitually disempowering self-limiting thoughts, interrupt the old loop, and consciously insert a new empowering narrative or perspective that aligns with your highest aspirations, consciously directing the energy and focus that was previously diverted into doubt or complaint. Intentionally engineer your information environment, your sources of input, to actively support mental patterns and narratives that are explicitly aligned with your highest aspirations and the reality you wish to create. Consciously choose uplifting, challenging, informative content over passive, negative, or distracting inputs. Remember that thought habits, the deeply grooved neural pathways of your mind, precisely like physical habits or muscles, transform and gain new patterns only through consistent, deliberate, new input and repetition, installing new software, rather than through occasional inspiration or wishful thinking alone. Actively feed and elevate the quality of your thought patterns by deeply studying how history's most consequential figures, individuals who faced and overcame monumental external constraints and opposition, consistently maintained extraordinary mental discipline and empowering interpretive patterns amidst seemingly insurmountable external circumstances that would cause most to despair or surrender their vision. The story of Gertrude Elion offers a compelling case study in thought mastery as reality creation. Facing pervasive, deeply ingrained gender barriers throughout the scientific research world, external obstacles undeniable and significant, she consciously maintained fundamental strategic thought patterns fundamentally different from many of her equally talented contemporaries. When esteemed research positions and opportunities remained explicitly closed and inaccessible to her, despite possessing exceptional qualifications and clear intellectual brilliance, when her contributions were unfairly dismissed by colleagues in the laboratory, purely based on gender rather than objective merit, when prestigious academic publications unfairly rejected her submissions without substantive review based on prejudice. Her fundamental thought discipline, where she chose to place her mental energy, remained utterly uncompromised. Rather than internalizing the unfair external limitations as proof of her own inadequacy, or spending valuable mental energy dwelling on resentment and the injustice of it all, she made the powerful, deliberate choice to consistently redirect her thinking towards exploring previously unexplored accessible research avenues, problems and questions she could pursue effectively, despite the institutional barriers that barred her from other paths. Her mastery was not about adopting positive platitudes or ignoring the reality of the challenges. It was about strategic mental allocation. She resolutely refused to waste precious finite cognitive resources on understandable but ultimately unproductive resentment or despair. Instead, she consciously invested that same immense mental energy, that same intellectual power, into innovative problem-solving within her chosen accessible domain, thinking differently about the possible, which ultimately predictably led to groundbreaking pharmaceutical developments against conditions previously considered untreatable, profoundly changing medical reality for millions globally. Are you currently, perhaps without fully realizing it, habitually allowing the external circumstances and challenges you face to rigidly dictate the nature and direction of your thought patterns, falling into default responses of worry, limitation, or complaint? Rather than consciously and strategically using your intentional thought patterns and mental energy to proactively reframe and transform your experience of those circumstances. What radical possibilities, what new opportunities and solutions might immediately emerge and become visible to you if you deliberately and consistently redirected the mental energy currently spent analyzing and dwelling on problems and obstacles towards actively envisioning and focusing on solutions, possibilities, and desired outcomes? Could your greatest present limitations, the barriers you currently perceive, actually fundamentally reflect internal thought boundaries and limiting beliefs you hold rather than insurmountable fixed external barriers or lack of resources? Might your most significant, most desired achievements and breakthroughs be patiently awaiting you just beyond a critical, conscious update to your deeply held thought patterns and core beliefs about what is genuinely possible for someone with your specific background, your available resources, and your unique past experiences? Consider this fundamental paradigm shift in personal causality. Perhaps significant success and your most fulfilling reality appear elusive, distant, or difficult to attain, not primarily because overwhelming external conditions are relentlessly opposing you or stacked against you, but fundamentally because your consistent internal perception patterns and dominant thought habits haven't yet fully aligned with the requirements and nature of the reality you desire to create and experience. The profound truth remains that external circumstances and challenges ultimately influence your lived experience primarily through the conscious or unconscious thoughts and interpretations you consistently maintain about them. Your powerful journey towards conscious reality creation begins decisively with conscious thought creation and deliberate mental management. When you fully comprehend, not just as an interesting idea, but as an experienced truth, that external conditions on their own do not magically create your reality or dictate your feelings. Rather, your dominant thoughts and interpretive patterns create your fundamental internal condition and powerfully shape the external outcomes you perceive and experience. That is when genuine, profound, and lasting transformation truly begins. Your extraordinary designed reality patiently awaits your intentional cultivation and mastery of your thought patterns. Fear dissolves when purpose grows. Fear loses its paralyzing power, its ability to hold you back and limit your life completely and reliably when it is directly overshadowed, diminished, and made relatively irrelevant by the gravitational pull of a truly compelling, meaningful purpose that is significantly larger than your immediate discomfort or self-concern. Imagine this powerful, transformative experience. Speaking confidently and engagingly to large audiences, sharing your message authentically, despite a lifetime of prior social anxiety or stage fright that would stop others cold. Pursuing your most ambitious, daring objectives and bold initiatives, despite the predictable wave of criticism, skepticism, or doubt from others who don't share your vision. Courageously initiating crucial, vulnerable conversations, personal or professional, that must happen despite the potential for uncomfortable conflict or the possibility of rejection. And confidently taking calculated, intentional risks, leaps of faith grounded in your purpose despite the very real potential for significant external failure or temporary setbacks. This kind of profound fear transcendence does not typically occur through the futile attempt to somehow eliminate fear entirely from your experience, becoming fearless in an unnatural state. It reliably occurs through conscious substitution and powerful reorientation. By actively and consistently replacing the limiting dominance of fear's protective mechanisms with the far greater magnetic force and direction provided by compelling, meaningful purpose. What once had the absolute power to stop you cold, locking you in inaction, now registers during moments of purpose-driven action as mere background noise. An observable internal state, but not the director of your behavior. Those who courageously identify, cultivate, and serve a sufficiently meaningful purpose discover a fundamentally empowering truth about the human spirit. They quickly realize they do not necessarily need to become fearless, an often unattainable standard, because they have effectively become profoundly purpose-focused. Their attention and energy are directed towards the objective of serving their purpose, which dwarfs the sensation of fear. Why does the conscious identification and pursuit of meaningful purpose reliably create this powerful fear-dissolving effect within the human psyche? Because truly meaningful purpose fundamentally activates deep-seated motivational forces, taps into core identity, and aligns with profound values energies within you that are quite simply powerful enough to consistently overpower, redirect, or diminish fear's primary protective mechanisms and impulse towards avoidance. History's most consequential contributors, the figures whose lives profoundly impacted the world, rarely experienced less inherent fear than their contemporaries. The biological and psychological capacity for fear is part of the human condition. Instead, they possessed purposes, causes, visions, or missions that were simply compelling enough, charged with enough meaning and importance to consistently render those underlying fears relatively irrelevant in the face of their driving imperative. Your brain, a remarkable survival organ, instinctively prioritizes perceived threats and discomfort as fundamental survival mechanisms, freezing or fleeing. But when conscious purpose fully engages your deeper identity, your values, your sense of contribution, and your personal meaning centers immediate protection and comfort, concerns often become secondary subsidiary to the overarching imperatives of contribution, impact, and realizing your potential through your purpose. When your clear, articulated purpose firmly establishes why intentional action is not merely desirable, but absolutely essential and non-negotiable, despite inherent discomfort, perceived risk, or the presence of fear, suddenly the need to feel ready, often a delaying tactic fueled by fear, becomes entirely unnecessary for courageous forward movement. Most crucially, a powerful sense of purpose functions as an internal compass and filtering system, effectively preventing fear from operating as the primary, often limiting decision-maker in your life. By establishing clear, superior selection criteria for action rooted in meaning and contribution, purpose automatically overrides fear's veto power based purely on discomfort. So how do you consciously identify, cultivate, and develop a sense of purpose that is potent and magnetic enough to neutralize even your most persistent, long-standing fears and limiting anxieties? Start by courageously identifying the specific areas of your life, professional, personal, creative, where fear in its various forms currently acts as a noticeable constraint on your highest potential, preventing you from taking action that you know deep down you are capable of and is aligned with your potential. Then, with those limiting fears in mind, actively explore what larger purpose, what contribution, what problem worth solving, or what vision of the future might prove compelling, magnetic, and important enough to override those specific identified concerns. Practice purpose amplification, actively connecting your immediate, often small daily actions to their furthest reaching positive implications and their alignment with your ultimate highest objectives. See the grand impact in the micro-action. Re-establish purpose reminders that are specifically designed to trigger automatically, mentally, or environmentally during moments of fear activation. Have a clear go-to thought, image, or phrase that instantly brings your purpose to mind when fear arises. Strengthen your fundamental purpose clarity through regular, dedicated contemplation of what contribution, large or small, utilizing your unique talents and experiences, would make your particular unique journey through life feel truly worthwhile and meaningful, regardless of external challenges, lack of public recognition, or financial outcome. Remember that the purpose muscles within you, the capacity for purpose to drive action precisely like physical muscles, develop their power and resilience through consistent stretching, taking actions aligned with purpose that venture just slightly repeatedly beyond your current comfortable limits dictated by fear. Actively feed the quality and magnetic force of your purpose by deeply studying how history's most impactful, most purposeful individuals, often figures who achieved seemingly impossible feats of contribution, maintained unwavering mission focus, a laser-like devotion to their cause, despite legitimately experiencing powerful reasons for caution, self-protection, or yielding to the limitations imposed by fear and external constraints. The story of Hideo Noguchi, a brilliant bacteriologist and medical researcher, offers a compelling case study in purpose transcending fear. Despite experiencing profound, debilitating social anxiety that made ordinary professional interactions extraordinarily uncomfortable and stressful for him, his powerful underlying purpose concerning disease eradication, his deeply felt need to alleviate human suffering from devastating illnesses, generated a consistent momentum and drive that reliably and consistently overpowered his significant psychological barriers related to social discomfort. When faced with the necessity of speaking at international conferences despite often paralyzing stage fright and social unease, when actively advocating for controversial or unorthodox research approaches despite inherent anxiety regarding criticism or professional disapproval, when taking on the crucial, demanding task of directing diverse research teams despite significant communication, apprehension and discomfort with group dynamics, his underlying commitment to his ultimate purpose never, ever faltered or yielded to his discomfort. This was not fundamentally achieved through achieving an impossible state of fearlessness, but through radical, consistent purpose prioritization. His focus on purpose wasn't about ignoring or denying the presence of his legitimate discomforts or fears. It was about consciously and consistently maintaining unwavering concentration on ultimate outcomes, on the contribution his work could make to humanity. Outcomes that were sufficiently significant, meaningful, and important in his own heart to fundamentally justify and overshadow the inherent unavoidable discomfort involved in enduring those fears and challenges moment by moment. The devastating diseases he courageously and persistently helped to address and conquer through this purpose-driven perseverance saved countless lives. Individuals who would likely have been lost to illness had he allowed his very real and significant social anxiety or discomfort with controversy to rigidly dictate or limit his professional boundaries and courageous pursuit of scientific truth. Are you currently perhaps subtly allowing conscious or unconscious fears of criticism, of rejection, of discomfort, of not being ready, of stepping outside comfort zones, to habitually establish the fundamental parameters of your actions and limit the scope of your ambition and contribution, rather than consciously and strategically using the profound gravitational pull of your true purpose to recontextualize those fears appropriately, recognizing them but choosing purposeful action anyway? What radical new contributions to your field, to your community, to the world, to your family, or to your own potential might immediately become possible in your life if you deliberately redirected your finite energy and conscious focus away from tirelessly trying to reduce fear or seek perfect comfort, and consciously directed that same energy towards courageously expanding purpose, identifying and serving a cause or objective larger than yourself and your immediate anxieties. Could your greatest current limitations, those things that hold you back, actually fundamentally reflect a purpose, insufficiency, or a lack of clarity regarding your deepest why, rather than simply reflecting an excessive, unmanageable level of fear within you? Might your most meaningful achievements, the contributions that will give your life deep satisfaction and impact, be patiently awaiting you just beyond those self-imposed fear barriers? Those zones of discomfort that would instantly dissolve, fade into irrelevance, or become effortlessly navigable before the overwhelming magnetic pull of a sufficiently compelling, clearly articulated purpose. Consider this fundamental, empowering reorientation of the psychological landscape. Perhaps fear primarily maintains its limiting, paralyzing power over you, not fundamentally because you somehow inherently lack courage or are biologically predisposed to anxiety, but significantly because you have not yet consciously connected in a deeply felt way with a driving purpose sufficiently powerful, magnetic, and meaningful to override your innate, automatic protection instincts towards comfort and avoidance. The liberating truth remains that fears primarily influence behavior and limit potential when a driving purpose is either lacking in sufficient clarity, appears insignificant compared to the fear, or has not yet been consciously and intentionally elevated in your mind as the primary motivator for action. Your journey towards profound liberation and unstoppable momentum fundamentally begins with conscious purpose, amplification, and clarity. When you fully comprehend, not just as an abstract idea, but as an lived experience, that mastering the influence of fear in your life primarily requires not futile fear elimination, but the conscious, deliberate elevation and clarification of a meaningful, compelling purpose, that is when genuine inner freedom, courage, and powerful impact truly begin to flow through you. Your powerful, fearless impact patiently awaits your conscious, intentional, and courageous, purpose-driven focus. Relationships determine your elevation, your personal and professional growth trajectory. Your speed and direction of development become virtually unlimited, unbound by individual limitation when you consciously master the profound art and practice of strategic, meaningful relationship cultivation. Visualize this incredible potential for acceleration and exponential growth. Accessing decades of hard-won wisdom, nuanced understanding, and crucial context through powerful mentorship, without personally having to live through every single costly mistake and difficult lesson yourself. Multiply your inherent impact and reach through conscious collaboration and synergistic teamwork, creating outcomes far beyond any single individual's capability. Receiving consistent, invaluable, honest feedback that ruthlessly exposes your blind spots, limitations in perspective and understanding that are simply invisible to personal reflection alone, and effortlessly encountering unforeseen opportunities, opening previously hidden doors that exist fundamentally beyond the immediate boundaries and visibility horizons of your current network and established connections. This kind of powerful relationship leverage and collaborative advantage does not develop accidentally, randomly, or automatically over time, simply through passive interaction. It reliably and effectively emerges through deliberate, intentional connection cultivation, conscious effort invested in building meaningful ties, through actively creating mutual value-seeking ways to contribute to others first, through consistently expressing genuine gratitude for the people in your life, until one day you look back and realize that your rate of learning, your access to resources, and your fundamental speed of growth have fundamentally drastically changed, moving at an accelerated pace. What once required years of isolated effort, relying solely on your own talent and limited perspective, now happens exponentially faster through months of intentional connected expansion and leveraging collective intelligence and resources. Those who consciously master the art and practice of strategic relationship development discover a genuinely transformative, liberating truth. They realize they do not need to personally know everything, or try to personally do everything themselves, relying solely on their individual capabilities, because they have intentionally and effectively connected with individuals and groups whose skills, perspectives, resources, and experiences precisely complement their own limitations and amplify their unique strengths. Why do cultivated relationships possess and create this extraordinary, often underestimated potential for significant elevation, acceleration, and expanded impact? Because genuine human achievement and transformative progress operate fundamentally as a profoundly social, interconnected phenomenon rather than occurring primarily as a process of isolated individual effort or inherent genius operating in a vacuum. Historical analysis of breakthrough contributors across all fields reliably reveals not purely isolated geniuses working alone in garrets, but deeply interconnected individuals embedded within powerful, often carefully cultivated networks of strong, mutually supportive relationships. Colleagues, mentors, patrons, collaborators, critics who challenge them constructively. The deliberate quality and depth of your relationships directly and reliably determines your access to timely and relevant information, your visibility regarding emerging opportunities, the availability of necessary resources and support, and ultimately your fundamental achievement ceiling, the height you are capable of reaching. When you truly recognize and embrace that relationships function not merely as optional social pleasantries or superficial networking contacts, but as essential high-octane growth accelerators, and critical infrastructure for innovation and impact, suddenly conscious strategic connection, cultivation becomes not just a side activity, but an absolutely essential developmental necessity and a core competency. Most significantly, cultivating relationship mastery effectively prevents your inherent individual capabilities, which are by definition limited in scope, from indefinitely constraining your ultimate impact or rate of development, not because you miraculously gain every skill, but specifically through the power of complementary collaboration, linking your strengths with the strengths of others to achieve what was previously impossible alone. So how do you deliberately develop powerful, mutually beneficial relationship patterns that consistently and predictably elevate your thinking, expand your opportunities, and support your growth, rather than merely entertain you or keep you comfortably within your existing limitations? Begin by conducting a rigorous relationship audit of your current connections. Honestly, identify which existing relationships or interactions in your life currently and consistently expand your thinking. Respectfully, challenge your limitations and comfortable perspectives and actively connect you with concrete growth opportunities and valuable resources. Simultaneously, identify relationships that consistently drain your energy, reinforce limiting beliefs, or distract you from your highest priorities. Practice deliberate exposure management by systematically and proactively increasing contact with consciously identified growth-catalyzing influences, people, ideas, environments, while simultaneously and intentionally reducing contact with those that are demonstrably progress-inhibiting or energy-draining. Establish dedicated non-negotiable relationship cultivation rituals or habits that ensure consistent focused investment, your time, attention, value, into your most significant growth-accelerating connections, even and especially despite a busy or demanding schedule. Consciously engineer your environmental patterns, your daily routines, and your social spaces to regularly and predictably expose you to individuals operating at a level slightly or significantly beyond your current achievement level or perspective, challenging your view of what is possible. Remember that relationship muscles, the skills and capacities for building and maintaining powerful connections, precisely like physical muscles, gain significant strength, depth, and effectiveness through consistent, proactive service and value creation to others rather than primarily through occasional extraction of favors or opportunities. Actively feed and elevate the quality of your relationships and network by deeply studying how history's most consequential, most interconnected figures systematically built and nurtured connection networks, intellectual circles, collaborative teams, advisory boards that were deliberately structured to compensate precisely for their personal limitations while simultaneously amplifying their unique core strengths exponentially. The story of Mortimer Adler, a prominent philosopher and educator, provides a classic illustration of relationship architecture for collective growth. Many of his equally brilliant intellectual contemporaries pursued primarily independent, isolated intellectual contributions, publishing singular works. He, in stark contrast, consciously focused his energy and ingenuity on creating powerful relationship systems and collaborative frameworks, discussion groups, book series, institutions that deliberately and strategically connected diverse thinkers from different disciplines and backgrounds across traditional academic and intellectual boundaries that normally fostered separation. When prevailing academic recognition and incentive structures explicitly favored specialized, isolated individual publication within narrow fields, when traditional institutional structures implicitly rewarded departmental loyalty and intellectual silos over genuine interdisciplinary collaboration and synthesis, when prevailing funding patterns actively supported fragmented, isolated research projects rather than initiatives promoting integrative dialogue and shared knowledge creation. Adler's unwavering strategic focus on intentionally building relationships and intellectual communities persisted. This was not driven by social politeness or the desire for popularity. It was powered by a deliberate, strategic connection architecture, specifically designed to accelerate the development and dissemination of collective wisdom, the sum being far greater than the parts. His relationship mastery wasn't about being liked. It was about building bridges and conduits for intellectual elevation, This deliberate cultivation of purposeful networks ultimately facilitated transformative educational initiatives and broader access to knowledge for millions, globally connecting previously isolated domains of understanding through his strategically built relationship bridges. Are you currently perhaps unconsciously measuring your definition of success primarily through the metric of independent individual accomplishment and isolated output, rather than consciously recognizing and pursuing achievement through collaborative elevation and collective impact facilitated by strategic relationships? What profoundly powerful possibilities, what opportunities for expanded impact and learning might immediately emerge and become accessible to you if you deliberately redirected some of your current energy and focus away from solely developing personal capabilities and directed it towards actively, strategically cultivating a network of growth-oriented, mutually valuable relationships? Could your greatest current limitations, those frustrating plateaus or perceived shortcomings, actually fundamentally reflect crucial connection gaps in your network or relationship approach, rather than primarily reflecting an inherent personal deficiency or lack of capability? Might your most significant, most transformative achievements, the kind of impact you truly yearn for, be patiently awaiting you just beyond those current relationship barriers? Those gaps in your network or skills in building bridges that you haven't yet intentionally strategically addressed or built. Consider this fundamental empowering reorientation. Perhaps your path towards significant growth, accelerated learning, and expanded impact appears challenging, slow, or frustrating, not primarily because you lack necessary inherent qualities, talent, or discipline operating in isolation, but significantly because you have profoundly critically underestimated how thoroughly, reliably, and fundamentally your relationships, both the people and the quality of those connections, ultimately determine and shape your development trajectory and ceiling. The profound truth remains that individual capabilities, talents, and effort operating alone ultimately only influence your fundamental achievement ceiling up to a certain point. After that, it is primarily intentional relationship mastery. Building effective synergistic connections that allows you to effectively transcend and ultimately remove those limitations altogether, accessing collective intelligence and amplified impact. Your powerful journey towards exponential growth begins decisively with conscious intentional connection cultivation. When you fully comprehend with deep intuitive understanding that your speed of elevation, your rate of progress and impact depends significantly less on polishing every single one of your personal traits and working solely harder in isolation, and depends significantly more on the conscious development of high-quality synergistic relationships, that is when genuine exponential acceleration truly begins to activate within you. Your extraordinary potential for elevation and expanded impact patiently awaits your conscious mastery of building and nurturing meaningful, powerful relationships. Resilience transforms setbacks into comebacks. Your capacity to transform devastating defeats, painful rejections, and significant misfortunes into powerful, defining victories and remarkable comebacks depends entirely, unequivocally, and directly upon your conscious development of profound resilience. That inner strength and capacity to bounce back, learn, and adapt in the face of adversity. Imagine this remarkable inner alchemical process in action within you. Business failures that felt utterly crushing at the time. Sources of shame and regret transforming through the lens of resilience into invaluable practical entrepreneurial education. A brutal but effective MBA delivered by the marketplace itself. Personal rejections, painful blows to your ego, and hopes reliably revealing themselves when met with resilience as crucial redirection opportunities, clearly highlighting paths that were not meant for you and freeing you up for those that are. Health challenges, unexpected diagnoses, or physical limitations, initially sources of fear and struggle forging within you a deeper, profound appreciation for your body, for life itself, and generating previously unknown reserves of inner strength and determination. And relationship disappointments, moments of heartbreak or betrayal, clarifying with sharp, often painful precision the absolute non-negotiables and core requirements for authentic, truly meaningful connections in your future. This kind of profound resilience alchemy, this powerful inner transformation of pain into strength and setbacks into fuel, does not happen automatically by default or merely because time passes. It reliably emerges specifically, consistently, and powerfully through conscious, deliberate meaning-making, actively seeking understanding and purpose in difficult moments, through intentional strategic response selection to adversity, replacing panic with presence through disciplined, purposeful growth extraction, relentlessly mining difficulties for lessons, until eventually, after sufficient practice and many trials, you look back and realize that setbacks, challenges, and disappointments that would utterly devastate, stop, or break many others around you barely interrupt your determined forward momentum, registering as merely necessary adjustments. What once instinctively appeared to you and would appear to others as momentum-destroying obstacles, roadblocks intended to halt your progress, now register in your resilient internal navigation system as merely necessary course corrections. Steering indicators, often painful ones, guiding you decisively towards superior, often unexpected destinations that you likely wouldn't have discovered or chosen if the path had remained straight and easy. Those who consciously and effectively master the cultivation of resilience discover a fundamentally empowering, liberating truth. They simply do not need to fear failure, inevitable setbacks, or unpredictable difficulties. Not because they are immune to them, but specifically because they have deeply learned and repeatedly practiced the indispensable skill of transforming every setback, regardless of its initial severity, into a powerful setup, a deliberate configuration for a stronger, wiser, more impactful comeback. Why does developing robust resilience grant you this powerful setback transmuting capacity? Because challenges, difficulties, and moments of resistance function fundamentally not merely as passive obstacles to be avoided. When properly processed, understood, and met with a resilient mindset, they are essential high-potency development catalysts. Forces that actively forge strength, reveal capabilities, and accelerate learning in ways that comfort never can. A rigorous historical examination of remarkable achievers across diverse fields, leaders, innovators, artists, athletes, reliably reveals not the complete absence of failure, significant setbacks, and crushing defeats in their journey, but a consistent, striking pattern of extraordinary high-quality response to it. Your consciously developed resilience capacity unequivocally determines whether difficulties encountered function for you as terminal events, unavoidable brick walls that halt all progress, or as profound transformational experiences, blacksmith's fires, refining your core strength. Your resilience determines whether unexpected rejection fundamentally represents a final conclusion, you're not good enough, or a powerful necessary redirection guiding you to a more aligned path. And ultimately, your resilience determines more than the external event itself, whether failure and difficulty fundamentally define your story and potential, or merely refine and strengthen the protagonist, you, within your journey. When you consciously recognize and embrace the powerful truth that setbacks, moments of intense resistance and difficulty, are not unfortunate aberrations, but consistently provide precisely the crucial resistance, the counterforce that is absolutely necessary and indispensable for fundamental strength development, psychologically, emotionally, and strategically, suddenly actively avoiding or seeking to bypass difficulty altogether transforms from appearing as a smart strategic choice into a fundamentally counterproductive, growth-stifling approach. Most significantly, cultivating deep resilience mastery explicitly prevents external circumstances, painful events, or other people's actions from unilaterally determining or controlling your fundamental long-term trajectory and potential outcome, not because you somehow eliminate their presence, but by consistently establishing reliable internal mechanisms for navigating, learning from, and choosing your response to them, making inner determination paramount. So how do you deliberately cultivate and develop resilience, that inner furnace for transforming difficulty, potent enough to reliably convert virtually any setback, large or small, into a strategic advantage, a learning opportunity, and fuel for your comeback? Start by consciously reframing your fundamental relationship with difficulty itself. Shift from seeing challenges as unfortunate occurrences or unfair punishments designed to prevent progress to actively recognizing them as inherent necessary capacity-building experiences. Resistance training for your potential strategically placed, to make you stronger and wiser. Practice immediate meaning searching when facing unexpected setbacks or painful situations. Force yourself to ask immediately, what is this specific difficulty, this challenge, perfectly designed to teach me or reveal to me about myself, others, or the situation right now? Deliberately seek the hidden curriculum within the chaos. Establish regular, reliable resilience rituals, consistent practices that healthily process disappointment, frustration, or sadness, productively extracting the energy and information, rather than allowing that emotional residue, that psychological weight, to accumulate unresolved and fester into bitterness, inertia, or resentment, draining your capacity for comeback. Actively engineer your fundamental response patterns, your habitual first reactions, to automatically scan for detect and actively seek opportunity, learning, and leverage within adversity and discomfort, rather than passively defaulting to merely documenting, complaining about, or being overwhelmed by the problems and difficulties themselves. Remember once more that resilience, muscles like physical ones, gain indispensable strength and density, not through comfortable, easy repetition of existing capabilities, but consistently through embracing progressive, intentional resistance. Deliberately leaning into challenges, navigating discomfort, and repeatedly choosing empowering responses. Actively feed and amplify the quality of your resilience by deeply studying, absorbing, and modeling how history's most consequential contributors, individuals who undeniably changed the world systematically and skillfully, extracted maximum learning, profound growth, and undeniable momentum from their most devastating defeats, periods of immense struggle and painful losses. The story of Clementine Churchill, a figure who experienced personal tragedy and intense public scrutiny that might easily have permanently sidelined or psychologically incapacitated many contemporaries, provides an extraordinary example of cultivating profound resilience mechanisms. She consciously converted immense personal grief and external adversity into purposeful, impactful action on a grand scale. When facing genuinely devastating personal losses that deeply threatened her emotional stability and sense of continuity, when encountering relentless institutional resistance and societal inertia that effectively blocked many traditional avenues for her contributions, when weathering significant public criticism, unfair judgment, and even slander that relentlessly undermined her standing and confidence, her underlying resilience architecture held firm, strong, and adaptable. This wasn't achieved through mere emotional suppression, forcing herself not to feel the pain. It was primarily built through active, continuous meaning-making, relentlessly seeking and extracting purpose even and especially from her deepest pain and suffering. Her resilience mastery wasn't about denial or putting on a brave face publicly while crumbling internally. It was fundamentally about strategic response selection, inner fortitude, and consciously redirecting emotional energy and insights into productive, externally focused action. The numerous crucial humanitarian initiatives that emerged directly from her often difficult, painful resilience process eventually profoundly improved conditions and outcomes for countless vulnerable populations globally. Millions who would likely have remained underserved or in despair had she allowed setbacks, tragedy, or criticism to rigidly dictate and terminate her potential contribution trajectory and sphere of impact. Are you currently viewing certain painful setbacks in your own life? Job losses, relationship endings, failed ventures, health issues, unmet goals, as fundamental journey-ending experiences, immovable walls, rather than potentially as powerful necessary course corrections and catalytic learning opportunities designed to steer you towards superior directions, capabilities, and outcomes you might never have otherwise considered without being forced to adapt? What radical new possibilities, what hidden opportunities, what undiscovered strengths might immediately emerge and become visible to you if you deliberately redirected your finite mental and emotional energy away from regretting or actively avoiding potential future setbacks and consciously directed it towards the unwavering, consistent cultivation of robust, versatile resilience? The capacity to thrive despite or even because of difficulty. Could your greatest current frustrations, those repeating patterns of difficulty, actually represent ingeniously disguised invitations towards discovering superior strategies, pathways, and directions that you fundamentally wouldn't have perceived, explored, or pursued without the necessity of being forcibly redirected by unexpected challenges? Might your most significant, most defining achievements, the victories you truly desire, be patiently awaiting you directly beyond those current resilience barriers. Those moments where you instinctively yield to discomfort or feel overwhelmed by difficulty, that currently register in your perception as utterly insurmountable obstacles, when in reality, they are challenges designed to forge the necessary strength. Consider this fundamental empowering shift in perspective on the nature of life's challenges. Perhaps significant transformative progress and compelling comebacks appear challenging, elusive, or slower than you desire. Not primarily because external circumstances or unpredictable events are uniquely overwhelmingly opposing you, but fundamentally because your conscious development of resilience, that inner capacity to learn from and navigate adversity, critically requires and relies precisely upon embracing the very challenges and difficulties you are currently facing. The profound truth remains that difficulties encountered in life ultimately influence your long-term trajectory and fundamental outcomes, primarily and powerfully based upon your resilience response to them. Your capacity to process, adapt, and learn, rather than being solely determined by their inherent objective severity or unfairness. Your extraordinary self-authored comeback from any setback patiently awaits your conscious development and courageous application of resilience. Your mindset determines your possibilities. Your inherent potential, your capacity to achieve, to impact, to experience fulfillment remains either actively imprisoned and severely limited or gloriously unleashed and fully realized, depending entirely and profoundly upon the dominant mindset you consciously cultivate, reinforce, and maintain on a daily basis. Envision this deep, pervasive difference in perception and outcome, seeing insurmountable problems where others intuitively spot hidden opportunities. Instinctively noticing rigid limitations where others readily identify crucial advantages or unique access points. Focusing dwellingly on daunting impossibilities where others with a different view proactively discover plausible, actionable possibilities. And relentlessly emphasizing perceived obstacles and reasons why you can't, where others perceive challenges as merely stepping stones or necessary stages on the path forward. This fundamental mindset architecture, the internal framework through which you perceive and interpret the world, does not spontaneously establish itself overnight in a dramatic fashion. It consistently, quietly, relentlessly develops over time through repeated, consistent thought patterns you indulge or cultivate through the habitual direction of your conscious focus, what you choose to pay attention to, through your repeatedly chosen interpretive lenses and default assumptions about yourself and the world, until eventually over time your perception automatically and effortlessly filters external reality through the lens of inherent possibility, potential, and opportunity, rather than reflexively filtering it through limiting beliefs, constraints, and impossibility. What once instinctively appeared to you, and might still appear to others with a different viewpoint, as fixed, immovable, and external barriers to progress, or happiness, now reliably register in your possibility-oriented mind as merely interesting, complex, and potentially rewarding creative challenges fully worthy of your focused, energetic engagement and innovative problem-solving. Those who consciously master the cultivation of a powerful, expansive mindset discover a deeply liberating, empowering truth. They intuitively realize they fundamentally do not need to desperately strive to change or control all external circumstances, events, or other people in their environment to find peace or make progress. An often exhausting and futile pursuit. Why? Because they have learned the far more powerful, effective, and reliable skill of radically transforming their fundamental relationship with and their subjective experience of any circumstance they encounter, simply by intentionally shifting their perspective, interpretation, and underlying beliefs about it. Why does cultivating an expansive, possibility-focused mindset reliably create this radical reality, altering, possibility expanding effect? Because perception itself, your way of seeing the world, functions not as a passive, neutral observation process, objectively recording fixed reality, but fundamentally as an active, dynamic creation process. It consciously and unconsciously filters all incoming sensory data and experience through your deeply established internal interpretive patterns and underlying belief structures. You don't see the world as it is, you see it as you are. Historical analysis of breakthrough achievers across diverse fields and throughout different eras reliably reveals not individuals who somehow faced unusually benign or easier external conditions compared to their peers who did not achieve breakthrough results. Instead, it consistently reveals individuals who simply maintained unusually effective adaptive and often counterintuitive perspectives or interpretive patterns about the very common conditions and ubiquitous challenges that everyone else around them was also facing and reacting to. Your active, consistent mindset, the lens through which you view challenges, interpret outcomes, and define what is possible, determines which pieces of external information, which signals from the world, actively receive your attention and mental focus amidst the constant noise. It dictates what meaning, what subjective story automatically gets assigned to the events and outcomes you experience. It strongly influences which potential responses, courses of action, or solutions appear reasonable, feasible, or even available to you in a given situation, inherently limiting or vastly expanding your perceived options. And ultimately, your deeply ingrained mindset influences profoundly and reliably the level of persistence, effort, and creative ingenuity that appears warranted or even possible when confronted with resistance, directly shaping the results you are capable of achieving. When you consciously recognize and embrace the powerful truth that your dominant mindset fundamentally operates as the active filter and shaper of your reality, coloring and organizing your experience, rather than merely a passive objective reflection of some fixed external truth or predetermined fate, suddenly actively cultivating conscious mental management and perspective control transforms from an optional, nice-to-have improvement into an absolutely essential and fundamental competency for effective life navigation, steering your ship deliberately towards your desired horizon. Most significantly, cultivating deep mindset mastery consciously prevents challenging external circumstances, other people's limiting beliefs about what is possible, or societal barriers from unilaterally determining or shrinking your fundamental possibility landscape. What you believe you can achieve, overcome, or experience. This happens not because the external factors magically disappear, but because you establish conscious, powerful, internal, interpretive filters and boundaries that redefine your perceived possibilities based on internal truth and chosen perspective, rather than solely based on default external limitations or opinions. So how do you deliberately cultivate and actively develop a powerful, expansive mindset? That internal operating system that consistently and reliably expands your perception of possibility, enabling you to see solutions and opportunities where others see only problems and limitations. Begin by conducting a rigorous, honest mindset audit of your current internal landscape. Identify your recurring thought patterns, those habitual mental loops or default narratives that are currently demonstrably both enabling powerful opportunity awareness and simultaneously creating artificial self-imposed limitations in your life experience. Practice active perspective flexibility. Actively challenge your automatic initial interpretation of challenging situations by deliberately attempting to adopt multiple alternative viewpoints. Ask yourself, how would someone I admire who is known for seeing possibility view this situation, or what's an entirely opposite interpretation of these events that might also be plausible? Establish regular, intentional mindset maintenance routines that systematically expose your thinking to expansive, possibility-oriented influences. Uplifting content, challenging ideas, inspiring people, environments where possibility thinking is the norm, rather than consistently exposing yourself to restrictive, problem-focused, or negative influences. Actively engineer your information environment, your news consumption, social media feeds, primary sources of input, to consistently support mental patterns aligned with seeing possibility, finding solutions, and embracing potential, rather than those that habitually reinforce problem-focused, complaint-oriented, or limitation-based thinking. Remember the mindset muscles. Your capacity for choosing empowering perspectives, precisely like physical muscles, develop robustness and flexibility through consistent, deliberate challenge to old, comfortable ways of seeing, actively trying on new viewpoints and beliefs, rather than solely through comfortable confirmation of what you already believe. Actively feed and elevate the quality and expansive nature of your mindset by deeply studying and modeling how history's most consequential, most impactful innovators, visionaries, and leaders consistently maintained an extraordinary, often counterintuitive perception of possibility, an unwavering belief in what could be done, despite facing seemingly insurmountable constraints, pervasive skepticism, and overwhelming evidence to the contrary from the conventional view. The story of Hyman Rickover, often called the father of the nuclear navy, offers a powerful example of a possibility-driven mindset reshaping reality. While many brilliant contemporaries, brilliant scientists and engineers of his time perceived what they believed to be absolute safety barriers and insurmountable technical impossibilities related to certain energy applications, effectively terminating potential pathways, Rickover, often seen as relentless and demanding, maintained a fundamentally different, powerfully expansive perception of possibility fueled by his vision of a nuclear-powered fleet. When conventional wisdom and entrenched scientific opinion repeatedly declared specific complex engineering challenges fundamentally unsolvable or prohibitively dangerous with existing knowledge, when large bureaucratic institutional forces actively resisted and pushed back aggressively against exploring unproven, often radical methodologies and technologies deemed too risky. When severe resource limitations and funding constraints constantly threatened the feasibility and viability of his projects, his core possibility mindset, his conviction that a solution could be found, a way could be built, never wavered. This wasn't born of ignorance of legitimate concerns. His critics often correctly identified enormous challenges. It was fueled by intense perspective discipline. A relentless focus on seeking and consistently detecting potential pathways, elegant workarounds, and innovative solutions that were simply invisible, obscured, or deemed impossible to limitation-focused observers bound by conventional thinking. His fundamental mindset architecture wasn't about blind optimism ignoring facts. It was about conscious strategic perception management and relentless inquiry that consistently illuminated potential solution paths and opportunities obscured to the conventional perspective, allowing him to lead teams to build what others deemed impossible. The revolutionary technological breakthroughs that emerged directly and inescapably from his persistently possibility-oriented mindset ultimately profoundly transformed entire industries and military capabilities that would have remained stagnant, unchanged, and operating within perceived limits had he adopted the prevailing consensus perception of impossibility or insurmountable limitation. Are you currently perhaps unconsciously allowing artificial self-imposed mental barriers, fixed beliefs absorbed from others, or default negative interpretations to rigidly establish and severely limit your fundamental achievement parameters and sphere of potential influence, rather than consciously and intentionally using the power of your mindset, your choice of perspective, to consistently expand your perceived possibility landscape? What genuinely powerful opportunities, what previously unseen solutions, what hidden resources might immediately become visible and accessible to you in your life and work if you deliberately and consistently shifted your perspective, redirected your conscious focus away from thoroughly documenting, analyzing, and lamenting perceived external limitations, and consciously focused instead towards actively and relentlessly detecting possibility-seeking solutions and envisioning desired outcomes? Could your greatest current frustrations, those seemingly intractable problems or unresolvable challenges, actually fundamentally reflect your dominant perception patterns, your deeply ingrained interpretive filters, rather than inherently being due to fixed objective or truly insurmountable external barriers or inherent lack? Might your most significant, most fulfilling achievements and breakthroughs, the ones you truly yearn for, be patiently awaiting you fully attainable, just beyond those current mindset limitations, those restrictive internal beliefs or narratives that are currently silently but effectively masquerading in your experience as objective external obstacles? Consider this fundamental, profoundly liberating reorientation of where true limits actually reside. Perhaps success, genuine progress, and expanded possibilities appear elusive, difficult to grasp, or painfully distant, Not primarily because external conditions are somehow uniquely and overwhelmingly opposing you or stacked against your efforts, but fundamentally because your consistent internal perception patterns and deeply ingrained beliefs haven't yet sufficiently aligned with, haven't fully encompassed the requirements and nature of the possibilities you seek. The profound truth remains that external circumstances, limitations, and obstacles primarily influence your trajectory and your perceived possibilities. Through the conscious or unconscious mindset, the interpretive lens and underlying beliefs you consistently maintain about them. Your powerful journey towards intentional possibility expansion and a radically different reality begins decisively with conscious perception transformation and intentional mindset cultivation. When you fully comprehend with deep intuitive understanding that external conditions and apparent limitations on their own do not ultimately create or limit your true underlying possibilities. Rather, your dominant mindset, your consciously cultivated perspective and belief structure powerfully determines which possibilities you are even capable of registering, believing in, and perceiving as viable and accessible to you. That is when genuine, profound, and lasting liberation truly begins to activate within your life. Your extraordinary potential for expansive possibilities patiently awaits your intentional cultivation and mastery of your mindset. Discipline bridges dreams to achievement. Your most cherished aspirations, your ambitious goals, your visions for a better future transform from mere hopeful, wishful thinking, from abstract potentials into tangible, experienced reality, solely and reliably through the sturdy, enduring bridge of unwavering, consistent discipline. That commitment to doing what is necessary even when it's uncomfortable or lacks immediate excitement. Imagine this steady, relentless construction process unfolding in your life. Mundane, seemingly insignificant daily actions, quiet, unspectacular repetitions, slowly but reliably accumulating over time, stone by stone, into monumental, externally visible achievements that seem almost magical in their emergence. Unremarkable daily routines, habits and processes often quite boring in themselves, steadily crystallizing over months and years into remarkable, undeniable results and mastery in a chosen field. Invisible daily commitments made to yourself, private acts of intention and effort that no one else sees or acknowledges, eventually manifesting inevitably as tangible, visible accomplishments and profound transformations in your life and capabilities. This quiet, powerful discipline architecture, the consistent adherence to chosen standards and routines, does not announce itself dramatically with bold proclamations or sudden heroic feats witnessed by the world. It operates consistently, quietly, reliably, patiently, relentlessly building the foundational infrastructure of your success, constructing the path towards your aspirations while everyone else around you is often distracted by more exciting, glamorous, or immediate activities and events. What once existed only in the realm of imagination as a potential future vision eventually materializes inevitably into your experienced circumstances and capabilities directly and reliably through the unglamorous, consistent application of deliberate discipline, repeated, purposeful action. Those who consciously master the cultivation and application of discipline discover a profoundly transformative, often surprising truth. They realize they fundamentally do not need to possess extraordinary innate talent compared to others, that variable and often overstated factor, because they have actively, deliberately developed and consistently applied extraordinary consistency in their purposeful efforts, a quality far more reliable than fickle talent alone, which often makes exceptional talent effectively irrelevant to their predictable achievement. Why does consistent, intentional discipline wield this unique, powerful capacity to transform abstract dreams into tangible, experienced reality? Because genuine, sustainable achievement in virtually any field or endeavor fundamentally operates as a cumulative process requiring consistent input and effort over time, rather than merely a single dramatic event or a sudden lucky break. A rigorous historical examination of exceptional performers, trailblazers, and changemakers across diverse fields reliably reveals not an inherent possession of unusual ability that others lacked. Instead, it consistently highlights an unusual, often remarkable consistency in their key underlying behaviors, routines, and daily decisions, the practical expression of discipline. Your consciously chosen consistent discipline patterns and cultivated routines directly and reliably determine which crucial skills and capacities in your potential receive dedicated attention and benefit from compound growth over time, accelerating your mastery. They dictate which vital relationships get maintained and deepened through consistent, thoughtful investment of time and energy. They fundamentally determine which opportunities become accessible and fully navigable to you over time through disciplined preparation and consistent effort opening doors. And ultimately, through the sum total of these compounding effects, your chosen discipline reliably predetermines what level of aspiration, what depth of impact, and what kind of person you inevitably become over time, shaping your identity itself. When you consciously recognize and fully embrace that discipline, functions not merely as an occasional accompaniment to moments of motivation or fleeting bursts of effort, but as the absolutely primary, non-negotiable ingredient for genuine achievement and sustainable success in life, suddenly the cultivation of consistent, deliberate action and disciplined routines transforms from appearing as something optional, dependent on innate personality, or merely a suggestion, into an absolutely essential foundational requirement for effective life navigation, building, and growth. Most significantly, consciously cultivated discipline mastery effectively prevents momentary desires, unpredictable external influences, or fleeting emotional fluctuations, wanting to rest when you should work, getting distracted, feeling discouraged, from unilaterally hijacking, disrupting, or ultimately derailing your fundamental long-term trajectory and highest aspirations. This happens by establishing powerful, automated action systems, purposeful habits and routines that operate effectively and reliably independent of temporary shifts in motivation or emotion, keeping you moving forward even when you don't feel like it. So how do you deliberately cultivate and actively develop discipline? That essential bridge-building capacity, powerful and consistent enough to transform even your most ambitious dreams, your seemingly impossible visions, into tangible, experienced reality. Start by clearly identifying your current discipline anchors, those areas in your life, perhaps small or seemingly insignificant, where you already demonstrate surprising consistency and follow-through, regardless of convenience, external pressure, or fluctuating mood. These are the areas where discipline already exists. Practice progressive discipline expansion by systematically installing and linking new desired habit patterns and routines. Small, manageable new disciplines by actively stacking or anchoring them onto those existing areas of proven consistency. Leverage what's already working. Establish clear, concrete implementation intentions. Specific, detailed mental pre-commitments that specify precisely when, where, and how key disciplined actions and habits will be executed, removing ambiguity and requiring minimal on-the-spot decision-making that often enables procrastination or avoidance. Make the action automatic. Actively engineer your physical environment, your daily schedule, and your social circles and support systems to make the path towards initiating and maintaining positive disciplined habits and desired actions feel noticeably easier and require significantly less friction or reliance on brute willpower than defaulting to negative or unproductive alternatives. Structure your world for success. Remember yet again that discipline muscles your capacity for sustained, consistent effort. Precisely like physical muscles develop significant strength, endurance, and reliability only through consistent, deliberate engagement with small but noticeable challenges through repeated purposeful action, daily lifting the weights of necessary tasks, rather than through occasional unsustainable heroic maximum efforts. Actively feed and elevate the quality, consistency, and effectiveness of your discipline by deeply studying and modeling how history's most consequential, most productive contributors, individuals who achieved remarkable results consistently over long careers, systematically structured their fundamental daily choices, routines, and habits in ways that virtually reliably guaranteed their eventual extraordinary success, almost independent of natural talent or fluctuating motivational states. The story of Margaret Hamilton, a brilliant computer scientist, provides a striking illustration of strategic discipline creating unprecedented outcomes. While many of her equally talented contemporaries approached their complex, demanding work inconsistently, often in bursts of intense effort, based on immediate inspiration or looming deadline pressure, she, in contrast, maintained extraordinary methodical routine discipline in her approach to software development, a deliberate process architecture that ultimately produced levels of software reliability, predictability, and perfection that were previously considered unattainable and unprecedented, crucial for the success of programs like the Apollo moon missions. When prevailing industry standards and expectations actually accepted the inevitability of frequent errors and bugs in complex software systems, almost normalizing failure when relentless deadline pressure aggressively encouraged developers to take procedural shortcuts, compromising quality for speed when engaging in intense overnight coding marathons, were culturally presented as admirable, heroic acts of dedication in the industry. Her underlying discipline architecture operated fundamentally differently from the norm. This was not achieved through some superhuman innate willpower, though she possessed dedication. It was built through the conscious design and unwavering adherence to systematic action patterns, detailed procedures, and consistent daily routines that continued functioning, continued ensuring quality and robustness, regardless of unpredictable fluctuations in inspiration, personal motivation, or external pressure. Her discipline mastery was not primarily about innate personality traits or dramatic public displays. It was profoundly about process design, engineering reliable, high-quality routines that transformed potential into predictable, perfectible performance, eventually yielding life-critical software reliability that would simply have remained undiscovered or deemed impossible had she allowed variable emotional states or external pressures to dictate the necessary consistency of foundational, often tedious development tasks. Are you currently perhaps unconsciously treating discipline as a fixed innate personality trait, something you either effortlessly possess or lamentably lack, determining your potential outcome at birth, rather than fundamentally recognizing it as a powerful, learnable, designable, systematizable process and choice framework that is reliably available to anyone willing to build it independent of inherent traits? What tangible achievements, what concrete results aligned with your deepest aspirations might immediately materialize and become possible in your life if you deliberately redirected your significant conscious focus and energy away from endlessly trying to find or cultivate enough motivation, a notoriously fleeting resource, and actively directed that energy instead towards consciously designing and relentlessly building robust, consistent action architecture, reliable routines that execute necessary tasks? Could your greatest current unfulfilled aspirations, those goals that seem just out of reach, actually fundamentally reflect a discipline insufficiency, a lack of consistent application and purposeful routine, rather than reflecting some inherent capability limitation or talent gap you believe yourself to have? Might your most meaningful, most desired accomplishments and transformative results be patiently awaiting you fully within reach, just beyond those current discipline barriers, those moments where consistency falters or desired routines are skipped? Barriers that currently register in your perception as overwhelming inspiration deficits or lack of talent, when in reality they are simply challenges awaiting the intentional installation of better habits. Consider this fundamental, powerful reframing. Perhaps genuine success, transformative progress, and consistent high performance appear distant, elusive, or unnecessarily difficult to attain, not primarily because you somehow inherently lack necessary innate qualities, traits, or skills compared to others, but significantly because you have profoundly, critically underestimated how thoroughly, reliably, and undeniably discipline, consistent, purposeful, often boring action ultimately determines which qualities, talents, and potentials you do possess are actually activated, honed, expressed, and converted into high-level performance and tangible results. The profound truth remains that inherent talents and potential ultimately only significantly influence your maximum achievement, potential, and speed up to a certain point, only when and to the extent that conscious, strategic discipline consistently converts that potential into predictable, repeatable, high-quality performance and results over the long term. Your powerful journey towards intentional dream manifestation and sustainable achievement begins decisively with conscious, intentional, disciplined installation and unwavering consistency. Your environment shapes your evolution. Your personal development trajectory, the kind of person you predictably become over time, is virtually predetermined, relentlessly nudged and sculpted by the combination of environmental influences. The places you spend time, the people you surround yourself with, the information you consume, that you consistently and habitually expose yourself to. Visualize this constant, subtle, profound influence at work in your life, steadily absorbing thought patterns, attitudes, and assumptions from your 5 closest relationships. Their way of seeing and interacting with the world quietly shapes yours. Adopting unconscious or conscious standards, norms, and levels of acceptable behavior from your most frequented communities or peer groups. Internalizing core values and beliefs about what's important, what's possible, and what's normal from your regular information diet. The media you consume, the books you read, the content you absorb. And developing or limiting your personal ambition, your vision of what you can achieve based significantly on the visibility horizons, the examples, possibilities, and challenges that are regularly presented to you by your surroundings. This often invisible, subtle environmental architecture, the aggregate of your chosen or default surroundings and inputs, does not dramatically announce its constant shaping power with sudden pronouncements. It operates invisibly, silently, continuously, and cumulatively, slowly and surely, molding your becoming. The process of you turning into a particular kind of person with specific habits, beliefs, and capabilities, even and especially while you remain largely unconscious of its pervasive influence. What once perhaps appeared instinctively to you as purely personal choices, your attitudes, your interests, your aspirations, your behaviors, increasingly reveals itself through the lens of environmental awareness as being profoundly, significantly, and predictably shaped by environmental imprint and consistent exposure. Those who consciously understand and master the principle of deliberate environmental design discover a deeply transformative, profoundly liberating truth. They realize they fundamentally do not need to rely solely on constant, effortful willpower, relying on self-discipline against immense pressure to achieve desired outcomes or make significant changes. Why? Because they have strategically learned how to consciously structure and curate their physical and social surroundings, their daily inputs and interactions in ways that naturally and automatically pull them subtly but powerfully towards desired behaviors, perspectives, and outcomes, making the right choices easier and the wrong choices harder by design. Why does the environment, the physical spaces, the people, the information, the experiences you expose yourself to, wield this extraordinary subtle developmental influence, functioning as a quiet sculptor of your becoming? Because human beings, by evolutionary design, are profoundly social organisms, deeply attuned to and constantly adapting their behaviors, beliefs, and attitudes to match their immediate and consistent surroundings. It's a core survival mechanism. Rigorous historical analysis of exceptional contributors, individuals who operated at high levels of performance, insight, and influence, reliably reveals not the possession of some superhuman level of innate willpower or a unique gene for discipline. Instead, it consistently highlights a striking pattern of unusual, deliberate, and conscious environmental crafting, structuring their workspaces, their schedules, their inner circles, and their information inputs to optimize their focus habits and learning in ways that others did not. Your deliberately designed or passively accepted surroundings consistently and reliably determine which ideas, concepts, and information you receive regular influential exposure to. They strongly influence what behaviors, habits, and norms appear normal or acceptable to you within your perceived social context. They determine which crucial opportunities for growth, learning, or contribution become visibly apparent or seem plausibly accessible to you. And ultimately, perhaps most powerfully, the composite of your environmental influences fundamentally and predictably shapes what kind of person you become over time. Your identity, your capabilities, your beliefs, and your aspirations. When you consciously recognize and deeply embrace that your surrounding environment fundamentally functions as the silent architect of your fate and capabilities, actively structuring what you do and how you think. Rather than merely operating as a neutral backdrop against which your real development occurs, suddenly consciously engaging in purposeful environmental engineering, and curation transforms from appearing as an optional, helpful enhancement into an absolutely essential necessity for deliberate personal evolution and steering your becoming. Most significantly, cultivating conscious environment mastery effectively prevents accidental influences, random negative inputs, or default unproductive surroundings from unilaterally and unconsciously shaping your development and evolutionary path. This happens by establishing an intentional framework for your daily experience, filling it with influences aligned with your desired direction rather than passively leaving your development trajectory to be dictated by default, accidental, or chaotic surroundings. So how do you deliberately design, build, and actively cultivate environments? Your physical spaces, your digital inputs, your social connections, powerful and influential enough to naturally, reliably propel you towards realizing your highest aspirations, rather than subtly holding you back or pulling you in a different direction. Begin by conducting a thorough, honest environmental audit of your current key surroundings and inputs. Identify specifically which current surroundings, your living space, your workspace, the first things you see and interact with daily, your most frequent conversations, your media habits, most strongly influence your thinking patterns, your default standards for behavior and performance, your habitual actions and routines, and your fundamental aspirations and sense of what's possible, examining their impact both powerfully, positively, and subtly negatively. Practice deliberate exposure management as a consistent strategy. Systematically increase your consistent contact and engagement with consciously identified growth-catalyzing influences. Individuals who challenge and inspire you, books and information sources that expand your thinking, environments designed for focus or creativity, while simultaneously and intentionally reducing contact and exposure with those that are demonstrably progress-inhibiting, energy-draining, or pull you towards limiting behaviors or perspectives. Establish consistent, actionable environmental reboot protocols, routines, or frameworks for quickly and effectively reconstructing your optimal internal and external surroundings after inevitable disruptions, travel, or periods of unavoidable exposure to suboptimal influences. Know exactly how to reset your space, your inputs, and your focus. Actively engineer your key physical spaces, your primary relationship networks, your default information sources, and your consistent visibility horizons, who and what you regularly see and hear, doing challenging things to consistently expose you to examples, standards, and possibilities that are slightly or significantly beyond your current comfort zone and achievement level. This consistent aspirational exposure gently but reliably pulls you forward. Remember again that environmental muscles, the capacity to actively shape and benefit from your surroundings, precisely like physical ones, gain significant strength and efficacy through consistent, deliberate cultivation and mindful engagement with positive influences rather than merely through occasional consideration of your surroundings. Actively feed and elevate the quality of your influence environment by deeply studying and modeling how history's most consequential, most transformative figures, individuals who fundamentally altered our understanding of science, art, industry, or society, systematically and deliberately structured their daily surroundings and key inputs in ways that powerfully and reliably facilitated their specific development towards groundbreaking objectives, often in ways counter to the prevailing norms. The story of Jonas Salk, the developer of the first effective polio vaccine, provides a powerful illustration of environmental engineering for revolutionary breakthrough. While many of his equally brilliant contemporary virologists and researchers were content and professionally successful, embedding themselves comfortably within conventional established research environments, traditional laboratories structured for incremental progress, he consciously and deliberately engineered a radically different research environment and culture, one specifically designed to be conducive to unconventional thinking, bold questioning, and cross-disciplinary synthesis. Recognizing that breakthrough often required escaping established norms, When traditional laboratory structures and rigid hierarchies inherently reinforced established methodology and rewarded predictable outcomes within known paradigms, when prevailing academic environments primarily rewarded incremental small-step advances and discouraged risky revolutionary leaps of thinking, when the professional scientific community and ingrained culture often implicitly or explicitly penalized paradigm-challenging perspectives or individuals who questioned core assumptions, Salk's deliberate environmental architecture and conscious cultivation of a unique lab culture created a protected intellectual space, a sanctuary for unconventional exploration where the fundamental constraints of prevailing dogma were minimized. This wasn't achieved through outright rejection of legitimate scientific standards, but through intentional cultivation of surroundings and team dynamics where different unconventional questions could be courageously asked, where collaboration crossed traditional boundaries, and where the focus was relentlessly on solving the monumental problem: polio. Even if it required inventing entirely new methods. His mastery of environmental engineering wasn't about professional isolation, it was about strategic influence selection and the intentional design of a collaborative ecosystem that eventually and reliably facilitated a medical breakthrough, the vaccine, that would likely have remained undiscovered, stuck within theoretical debates, or deemed too risky to pursue had he allowed the default research environments of the time to rigidly determine his thinking patterns, his methodology, and the collaborative spirit of his team. Are you currently, perhaps without fully recognizing its profound power, leaving your single most powerful developmental force, your encompassing environment, your inputs, your associations, primarily to random chance inertia or societal default settings, rather than engaging in conscious strategic design and deliberate cultivation? What remarkable transformations, what profound evolutionary leaps in your thinking, your habits, your capabilities might immediately and naturally occur in your life if you deliberately engineered your key daily surroundings, your workspace, your information inputs, your core connections, to be actively, intentionally aligned with and constantly pulling you towards your highest aspirations, your desired capabilities, and your most impactful contribution. Could your greatest current unfulfilled potential, those capabilities you feel remain dormant, actually fundamentally reflect a misalignment or mismatch between your desired path of evolution and the prevailing influences and structure of your current daily environment, rather than fundamentally reflecting an inherent personal limitation or lack of will? Might your most significant, most transformative evolutions, becoming the person you are meant to be, achieving results previously unthinkable, be patiently awaiting you just beyond the conscious effort and focused intentionality required for environmental reconstruction and curation? A process that might currently register in your mind as merely optional secondary or cosmetic changes, when in reality it is a core driver of who you become. Consider this fundamental liberating reorientation of where true evolutionary leverage resides. Perhaps personal development and achieving transformative growth appear challenging, effortful, or frustratingly slow, not primarily because you fundamentally lack the necessary innate qualities, discipline, or talent within you as an individual, but significantly because you have profoundly critically underestimated how thoroughly, reliably, and effectively your consistent environment, the influences you repeatedly expose yourself to, ultimately determines which qualities, habits, beliefs, and potentials you do possess are naturally activated, cultivated, and inevitably emerge over time. The profound truth remains that while individual willpower and inherent traits are undoubtedly factors in growth, their primary influence ultimately peaks and gives way when intentional environmental design and conscious influence curation step in and begin to exert their powerful, consistent pull, effectively rendering constant reliance on brute willpower largely unnecessary for navigating towards your desired future state. Your powerful journey towards deliberate, accelerated evolution and becoming the highest version of yourself begins decisively with conscious, intentional environmental engineering and dedicated curation of your world. Communication mastery creates connection. Your relationships, those vital bridges that enrich life, fundamentally transform from superficial exchanges, from polite but shallow interactions, into profound, deep, and meaningful connections, into authentic understanding and true partnership solely and reliably through the dedicated cultivation and practice of communication mastery, the intentional ability to clearly express yourself and genuinely understand others. Envision this profound transformation in the nature of your human connections. Expressing complex, nuanced ideas and feelings with crystal clarity, precision, and authenticity, ensuring your message is not just heard, but accurately received and understood. Resolving conflicts, navigating disagreements, and overcoming misunderstandings, not through avoidance or passive aggression, but through productive dialogue, courageous vulnerability, and seeking mutual understanding. Inspiring, impactful action and meaningful change in others, not through force or manipulation, but through compelling, authentic, and persuasive language that resonates with their values and perspectives. And creating powerful understanding, empathy, and genuine rapport across significant differences in background, opinion, perspective, or belief. This vital communication architecture, this intricate structure of shared meaning built through language and active listening, does not develop accidentally, automatically, or intuitively for most people without deliberate effort. It reliably emerges instead through dedicated, intentional skill cultivation, learning the principles and practices of effective communication, through consistent patient practice, applying those skills repeatedly in real-world interactions, and through thoughtful, humble refinement, learning from misunderstandings and seeking to improve until eventually your consciously chosen words, your active listening, and your expressive clarity consistently and reliably build sturdy, reliable bridges of understanding where misunderstandings, barriers, and disconnection previously existed. What once frustratingly registered in your interactions as persistent misunderstandings, unintentional slights, or unresolvable disagreements stemming from a lack of skill in encoding and decoding messages now reliably transforms through the practice of communication mastery into consistent comprehension, deeper empathy, and effective collaborative resolution stemming from deliberate intention and refined technique. Those who consciously master the multifaceted skills and principles of communication discover a genuinely transformative, liberating truth about human connection. They realize they do not necessarily need to simply accept superficial connection or resigned relationship limitations dictated by inherent differences in personality, background, or viewpoint. Why? Because they have actively, deliberately developed the expressive capacity, the skill in using language, tone, empathy, and structure to proactively create understanding and build robust bridges of connection and shared meaning across virtually any divide, any difference, any gap in perspective that might previously have felt insurmountable. Why does intentional communication mastery uniquely possess and create this powerful connection-building capacity, allowing for deeper bonds and effective collaboration? Because human relationships in all their complexity and depth fundamentally operate as a multifaceted, linguistic, and interpretive construction. Built, maintained, nurtured, or sometimes damaged through words, tone, listening, and understanding. Regardless of the specific context, the participants involved, or the nature of the relationship. Rigorous historical analysis of exceptional leaders, influential changemakers, and successful consensus builders consistently reveals not the possession of some magical inherent charisma or unique social talent that defies analysis. Instead, it consistently highlights an unusual, often painstaking but highly effective linguistic precision. A mastery of articulating ideas, clearly choosing impactful language, and actively listening with empathy and understanding. The consciously cultivated quality of your communication skills directly and reliably determines which crucial ideas, complex emotions, or subtle intentions get accurately transmitted from your inner world to another person's understanding, overcoming inherent ambiguity. It dictates which meaningful connections, authentic rapport, deep trust, collaborative synergy become truly possible and sustainable with others. It fundamentally influences which conflicts and disagreements can be effectively navigated, clarified, and find constructive resolution rather than escalating or lingering unresolved. And ultimately, the quality of your communication significantly determines what level of collaborative achievement and shared value reliably emerges from your interactions and relationships. When you consciously recognize and deeply embrace that communication functions fundamentally not as a simple neutral process of information transfer, sending bytes of data, but instead operates as the vital dynamic architecture of relationship itself, building or demolishing trust, understanding, and connection through exchange. Suddenly cultivating deliberate expression mastery and conscious listening skills transforms from appearing as merely a social nicety, an optional soft skill, into an absolutely essential foundational infrastructure requirement for building a life filled with meaningful relationships, impactful collaboration, and profound human connection. Most significantly, consciously cultivating communication mastery effectively prevents superficial exchanges, casual interactions, or polite avoidance from ultimately replacing genuine connection, authentic understanding, and meaningful collaborative action in your most important relationships and spheres of influence. This happens by establishing conscious linguistic patterns, actively chosen approaches to dialogue, and consistent listening habits that are intentionally designed and highly capable of expressing and fostering true understanding, deep empathy, and the sharing of complex truths, even across seemingly difficult divides. So how do you deliberately cultivate, develop, and actively refine communication skills, powerful and precise enough to reliably build bridges of connection, create authentic understanding, and facilitate collaboration, even between individuals or groups with significant existing differences in perspective, values, or background? Start by actively identifying your current habitual communication patterns, the ways you most typically speak, listen, and react in interactions. Consciously identify which of these patterns are currently demonstrably both facilitating positive understanding and simultaneously contributing to recurring misunderstandings, unintentional conflicts, or feelings of disconnection in your important relationships and interactions. Practice conscious perspective, taking a vital act of empathy by deliberately attempting to adopt the linguistic frameworks, cultural contexts, core values, and even the typical assumptions of those you consistently find yourself struggling to understand, respectfully engaging with their worldview to better calibrate your message. Ask yourself, if I saw the world primarily through their experience, how would I phrase this idea? Establish regular feedback loops, both formal and informal, in your key relationships and collaborations, actively seeking honest input that reliably reveal any gaps between your intended message and how it is actually received and interpreted by others. Learn how your communication truly lands. Actively engineer your expression patterns and your approach to dialogue to proactively address potential predictable areas of misunderstanding or sensitive points before they unintentionally occur, preempting friction by offering context clarification or acknowledging differing perspectives up front. Choose clarity and proactive bridge building. Remember that communication muscles, the capacity for clear expression and effective listening, precisely like physical ones, gain significant strength, fluency, and effectiveness only through consistent, dedicated practice and real-world application, navigating complexity rather than solely through acquiring theoretical knowledge about communication principles in the abstract. Practice makes proficient, and refined practice leads to mastery. Actively feed and elevate the quality and effectiveness of your communication by deeply studying and modeling how history's most unifying, most impactful figures, leaders, peacemakers, consensus builders, consistently maintained extraordinary dialogue, effectiveness, built trust, and facilitated understanding, even across profound, entrenched differences, deeply held historical grievances, and conflicting ideologies that would typically escalate conflict or entirely terminate any productive exchange. The story of Maya Angelou, the renowned poet, author, and civil rights activist, provides a striking illustration of extraordinary communication mastery used to bridge divides. While many equally passionate contemporaries also dedicated to social change often understandably struggled and faltered when attempting to communicate across the deep and painful social and racial divides of her era, frequently encountering anger, mistrust, and seemingly impenetrable barriers to dialogue, she consistently developed extraordinary empathetic linguistic bridges and narrative approaches that consistently created unexpected understanding, surprising empathy. and fruitful common ground where others found only frustration, conflict, and reinforcing barriers. When centuries of historical grievances and unresolved pain aggressively blocked productive, forward-looking dialogue, making every word freighted with historical weight, when fundamentally different lived experiences, privileged structures, and cultural perspectives created seemingly incompatible or irreconcilable viewpoints that defied simple resolution, when deeply emotionally charged topics related to race, justice, and equality often erupted into unproductive shouting matches. Challenging analytical discussion, her carefully crafted communication architecture, her deliberate choice of language, tone, and vulnerability, maintained effectiveness, fostering listening even in highly charged environments. This wasn't achieved through diluting difficult, painful truths or avoiding the uncomfortable realities of injustice. It was profoundly achieved through deliberately expressing those necessary truths and complex emotions within carefully chosen frameworks, through shared human stories and universally recognized emotional language that made them accessible, relatable, and understandable, genuinely heard, even by individuals who held radically different starting positions, lived experiences, and underlying beliefs. Her profound communication mastery wasn't merely about being pleasant, likable, or employing surface charm. It was profoundly about strategic linguistic precision, empathetic articulation, and conscious narrative design that eventually facilitated genuine social transformation, reconciliation, and deepened human connection that would have likely remained purely theoretical, unattainable in the realm of abstract ideals, had she allowed prevailing communication barriers, entrenched biases, and mutual mistrust to dictate and terminate the very possibility of creating crucial connection. Are you currently, perhaps without fully realizing its profound impact, implicitly or explicitly accepting certain relationship limitations, feelings of chronic misunderstanding, or persistent difficulty connecting deeply with certain types of people as inevitable aspects of life, or proof of fundamental incompatibility rather than proactively recognizing and framing them as solvable communication challenges? Patiently awaiting more intentional linguistic approaches, more developed skills, or more empathetic listening? What radical possibilities for deeper connection, more effective collaboration, and more profound mutual understanding might immediately become possible and accessible to you in your personal and professional life if you deliberately redirected some of your conscious focus and energy away from instinctively trying to prove the correctness of your own viewpoint, often a barrier to listening, and consciously directed it instead towards actively, strategically prioritizing, creating understanding, and building robust shared meaning, focusing on how your message is received as much as how it is sent. Could your greatest current frustrations, those chronic points of tension or disconnection in your important relationships and collaborations, actually fundamentally reflect a correctable communication insufficiency or underdeveloped skills in bridging differences rather than necessarily indicating inherent incompatibility, irreconcilable differences in core values, or a fundamental inability to connect? Might your most meaningful, most impactful collaboration, your deepest personal connections, your greatest shared creations, be patiently awaiting you fully within reach, just beyond those current communication barriers? Those moments of predictable misunderstanding or inability to connect deeply, that currently register in your perception as fixed, irreconcilable differences between people, when in reality they are often challenges in translating understanding across divides. Consider this fundamental empowering reorientation, perhaps creating authentic connection and deep understanding, particularly across differences, appears challenging, effortful, or even impossible, not fundamentally because the differences themselves are simply too vast or too complex to bridge, but significantly because the habitual communication approaches, the methods of dialogue and listening, haven't yet sufficiently matched or adapted to the specific complexity and nature of those differences. The profound truth remains that differences in perspective, background, or opinion primarily limit the potential depth, trust, and effectiveness of relationships only. To the extent that the conscious practice of communication, empathetic listening, clear expression, bridging language, fails to adequately build bridges and create sufficient understanding between individuals, Your powerful journey towards building genuinely profound, impactful, and fulfilling connections with others begins decisively and fundamentally with conscious, intentional communication mastery. When you fully comprehend with deep intuitive understanding that creating authentic understanding and navigating differences effectively primarily requires not necessarily complete agreement on every point or perfect alignment of worldviews, but consistently applying conscious, empathetic, and effective expression and listening skills. That is when genuine, profound, and lasting transformation in the quality and depth of your relationships truly begins to activate within your life. Your extraordinary potential for building transformative, deeply meaningful connections patiently awaits your dedicated development and mastery of communication. Gratitude transforms perspective completely. Your entire fundamental perception of life, the way you consistently view the world, yourself, and your circumstances, shifts dramatically, fundamentally, and reliably when the active practice of gratitude, cultivating conscious appreciation, becomes your dominant mental mode and primary lens through which you filter experience rather than remaining merely an occasional emotional response that arises spontaneously when things are obviously good. Imagine this radical, uplifting transformation in how you experience reality consistently and reliably, finding inherent abundance, resources, and fortunate circumstances within your reality, even amidst periods of challenge where others default to seeing only lack, scarcity, and limitation. Instinctively noticing, acknowledging, and celebrating genuine progress and momentum, even amidst the messy process of tackling complex goals or experiencing apparent setbacks that might cause others to lose hope. Consciously experiencing deep-seated contentment, peace, and satisfaction in the present moment within the active process of ambitious, striving effort and purposeful work, rather than deferring all happiness until some distant future outcome is achieved. And consistently discovering unforeseen opportunities, hidden resources, and avenues for learning within the very heart of difficult challenges and periods of discomfort. This conscious, cultivated gratitude orientation, this positive perceptual bias, does not miraculously emerge simply through occasional moments of passive appreciation when something obviously wonderful happens. It actively develops and strengthens through consistent, systematic thankfulness practice, dedicated routines of noting and acknowledging, through deliberate benefit identification, consciously searching for things to appreciate in any situation, through consistent blessing documentation, actively recording what you are grateful for, until eventually, through faithful practice, your conscious perception system is reliably and automatically calibrated to immediately illuminate gifts, value, and opportunity within every circumstance you encounter, even the difficult ones, shifting your default filtering mechanism. What once automatically triggered familiar patterns of complaint, frustration, negative focus, or counterproductive social comparison with others who seem to have it easier, now reliably generates genuine, heartfelt appreciation for what is present, for the opportunity to learn, for the resilience you are building. Those who actively master the cultivation and application of consistent gratitude discover a fundamentally liberating truth. They intuitively realize they fundamentally do not need to wait passively for perfect circumstances, a mythical external state of constant ease and fortune, before they are capable of experiencing profound contentment, peace, and joy. Why? Because they have actively, deliberately learned the far more reliable and powerful skill of extracting meaningful value, acknowledging progress, and perceiving hidden abundance from any circumstance that arises, making their state independent of external perfection. Why does actively practicing and cultivating gratitude consistently create this powerful, reality-altering, perspective-transforming effect? Because conscious appreciation and acknowledgement function fundamentally not merely as a passive response to blessings after they appear. Instead, gratitude actively functions as a powerful revealer of blessings, opportunities, and value that were always already present, but were previously invisible or overlooked, obscured to a complaint-oriented or scarcity-focused perception. A rigorous historical examination of exceptionally effective individuals across diverse fields and challenging historical periods reliably reveals not the possession of unusually easy circumstances or external advantages that others lacked, Instead, it consistently highlights a striking pattern of unusual, deliberate, and often remarkable appreciation for the common, ubiquitous advantages, resources, and opportunities that were also available to many others, but went unacknowledged or unleveraged by those without a grateful mindset. Your conscious, consistent gratitude practice directly and reliably determines which existing assets, resources, and support systems in your life you actually recognize, consciously appreciate, and are therefore capable of leveraging for growth and impact. It dictates what genuine progress, steps forward, learning, resilience built, gets consciously celebrated, acknowledged, and used as fuel for momentum rather than being dismissed as insufficient or overlooked in the rush towards the next goal. It influences which crucial opportunities for learning, connection, or contribution become visibly apparent and seem accessible to you because you are scanning the environment through a lens of what's possible and what's present rather than what's missing. And ultimately, through the sum total of these shifts in focus, your consciously cultivated gratitude fundamentally and predictably dictates what level of intrinsic satisfaction, fulfillment, and contentment becomes genuinely accessible to you in the present moment, regardless of your external condition, making fulfillment an internal state rather than an external outcome. When you consciously recognize and deeply embrace that gratitude functions fundamentally not merely as an occasional pleasant emotion that washes over you sometimes, but instead operates as an essential primary perception filter that actively shapes and colors your fundamental experience of reality. Suddenly actively cultivating consistent thankfulness transforms from appearing as an optional pleasantry, a soft skill or something extra, into an absolutely essential requirement for conscious, intentional, and fulfilling life navigation. Most significantly, cultivating deep gratitude mastery effectively prevents temporary or even persistent circumstantial deficiency challenges or external lack from unilaterally dictating or limiting the quality and richness of your fundamental experience of life. This happens by consistently establishing profound appreciation focused on acknowledging and valuing what is present and available as the fundamental primary source of fulfillment and richness in your life, rather than solely relying on the accumulation or acquisition of external things or the achievement of future perfect outcomes, which are inherently fragile sources of sustained happiness. So how do you deliberately cultivate, develop, and actively reinforce gratitude? That powerful engine for transforming perception, potent enough to reliably convert even consistently challenging or adverse circumstances into profound opportunities for appreciation, learning, and finding value. Begin by conducting a thorough, honest advantage inventory of your life as it exists right now. Systematically document in writing or mentally the specific benefits, resources, supports, relationships, and capacities you regularly enjoy, experience, or benefit from in your life, but might rarely consciously acknowledge across multiple dimensions. Physical well-being, relational connections, access to opportunities available, resources, even simple ones, past lessons learned, innate capabilities, the presence of beauty, etc. Make the invisible visible. Practice conscious contrast consideration as a regular discipline. Actively reflect regularly, perhaps briefly each day or week, on how your current conditions, even with their challenges, would likely appear from the perspective of individuals or communities experiencing significantly less advantage, dealing with extreme hardship, or facing vastly more severe circumstances than your own. This external comparison is not for judgment but for recontextualization of your own experience and fostering perspective-based gratitude. Establish daily, non-negotiable gratitude rituals. Consistent small habits like journaling. 3 things you're grateful for, a moment of quiet reflection, or simply saying thank you consciously, that deliberately direct your conscious attention and focus toward specific blessings, assets, or moments of unexpected ease before you fully engage with the day's potential challenges, pressures, or perceived deficiencies. Set your perceptual filter intentionally early. Actively engineer your primary information consumption patterns and exposure to the wider world, the stories you read, the news you watch, the perspectives you encounter, to regularly expose you to circumstances, human experiences, and global realities that compassionately and realistically contextualize your own challenges and difficulties within the broader spectrum of human experience. This broadens perspective and fosters gratitude for what you do have and can do. Remember again that gratitude muscles, the capacity for consistently seeing and feeling appreciation, precisely like physical ones, develop significant strength and automaticity only through consistent, deliberate exercise. Regularly practicing the intentional act of finding and focusing on things to be thankful for, actively engaging with a positive mental pattern, rather than only relying on passive occasional inspiration when things are obviously going well. Actively feed and elevate the quality and consistency of your appreciation by deeply studying and modeling how history's most consequential, most resilient, and most influential contributors, individuals who achieved remarkable feats of spirit and impact, consciously maintained extraordinary, unwavering thankfulness, and discovered meaning even amidst personal and collective circumstances far more challenging, objectively difficult, and pain-inducing than those that typically trigger our more common complaints or feelings of lack in contemporary life. The story of Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, provides perhaps one of the most profound illustrations of conscious gratitude and meaning detection as an ultimate act of resilience and perceptual transformation. While many of his contemporary prisoners' understandable focus was primarily on the horrific damage, suffering, and dehumanization they experienced in concentration camps, a justified but limiting perspective, Frankl, through intentional effort, maintained a fundamentally different pattern of appreciation and meaning-seeking within those unimaginable conditions. He consciously detected sources of beauty, a sunset, human connection, a brief kind word, moments of respite, a shared meal, an inherent meaning, possibility, the will to find purpose, even in suffering, that were accessible and present, even within the most adverse, degrading circumstances, yet were completely invisible to those whose perception was singularly focused on lack, complaint, or damage documentation. When conventional therapeutic approaches of his time might emphasize the analysis of personal limitations or dwelling on trauma, when prevailing cultural narratives often reinforced victim identification, and when his personal history undeniably suggested permanent psychological damage was an almost certain outcome, his conscious gratitude architecture and commitment to finding meaning remained operational. This wasn't through denying the reality of the legitimate immense suffering. He bore witness to it powerfully. It was through consistently, deliberately illuminating and focusing on previously unrecognized gifts, acts of kindness, opportunities for meaning, and sources of inner resilience that were authentically accessible, even within that immense suffering, often precisely because of it. His mastery of gratitude and meaning detection wasn't about forced, superficial positivity ignoring the surrounding horror. It was fundamentally about profound perspective discipline. A conscious choice of what to seek, what to focus on, and how to interpret reality, that consistently detected and actively created meaning dimensions, opportunities for contribution, even helping others within the camp, and reasons for resilience that were fundamentally invisible to an observation singularly oriented towards complaint-suffering documentation or external acquisition. The transformative psychological healing approaches and profound philosophy that emerged directly and inevitably from his appreciation-oriented perspective, his discovery of inherent meaning and dignity in suffering, ultimately empowered countless individuals to find strength and purpose in their own trials long after his experience. Are you currently perhaps unconsciously habitually allowing the inevitable imperfections, difficulties, or temporary lacks of your current circumstances to solely determine or diminish the fundamental quality of your internal experience of life and your capacity for contentment, rather than consciously, proactively using the power of gratitude and intentional meaning, seeking to actively extract value, learning, and unexpected richness from any circumstance, leveraging what is present? What genuinely radical perspective shifts, what profound inner transformations might immediately and naturally occur in how you experience your daily life if you deliberately and systematically redirected a significant portion of your conscious attention and focus away from habitually scanning for and dwelling on what is missing, wrong, or challenging, and consciously redirected it relentlessly towards actively acknowledging, appreciating, and focusing on what is authentically present, abundant and right, however small or obvious it may seem? Could your greatest current sources of dissatisfaction, frustration, or perceived lack in your life actually fundamentally reflect ingrained, correctable appreciation deficits? A habit of overlooking what is good and present, rather than indicating objective, genuinely insurmountable circumstantial problems or inherent personal inadequacy. Might your most fulfilling, most peaceful, and genuinely satisfying experiences of life be patiently awaiting you, fully within reach, just beyond those current gratitude barriers. Those habitual tendencies towards complaint, comparing negatively, or focusing on perceived lack. Barriers that currently register in your perception as entirely legitimate complaints about external reality. Consider this fundamental, empowering reorientation of where true satisfaction resides. Perhaps genuine fulfillment, deep satisfaction, and an experience of inner richness appear elusive, difficult to attain, or painfully distant, not primarily because your external conditions are uniquely opposing it or fundamentally lack what is necessary, but significantly because your consistent practice and cultivation of gratitude, your internal capacity to see and value what is present, hasn't yet developed sufficiently to reliably perceive and fully reveal the fulfillment that already exists or is accessible within your current reality. The profound truth remains that external circumstances, conditions, and external acquisitions ultimately only significantly influence your level of internal satisfaction and richness, primarily through the powerful subjective gratitude lens through which you consciously or unconsciously choose to perceive and interpret them. Your powerful journey towards experiencing a fundamentally transformed reality, filled with more perceived abundance and peace, begins decisively with conscious, intentional appreciation cultivation. When you fully comprehend, with deep intuitive understanding, that cultivating a profound sense of fulfillment and experiencing richness in life ultimately requires not the endless pursuit of perfect, challenge-free external conditions, which are impossible, but the consistent, deliberate practice of gratitude, actively finding value in what is that is, when genuine, profound, and lasting liberation from external dependence truly begins to activate within your life. Your extraordinary potential for experiencing a powerful, transformed perspective patiently awaits your dedicated development and mastery of gratitude. Your habits determine your destination. Your life's ultimate trajectory, the kind of person you reliably become over time, the level of mastery you attain, the outcomes you achieve, and the fundamental nature of your experience ultimately emerges not from rare, occasional, large, seemingly heroic actions sparked by fleeting inspiration or urgent deadlines, but overwhelmingly, reliably, and fundamentally from the sum total and the compound effect of the small, daily habits. Those routine behaviors you repeat almost automatically, that you consistently, often unconsciously perform day after day. Envision this subtle yet immense cumulative power of consistent habit in action within you. Minor daily health choices. A morning walk, a sugary drink, enough sleep, reliably accumulating over months and years into vibrant, sustainable energy and physical well-being, or inevitably compounding into chronic disease, low energy, and compromised health. Small, consistent learning practices. Reading a few pages, reviewing notes, briefly consistent practice of a skill. Reliably compounding over time through the force of compounding into deep wisdom, increasing competence, or undeniable stagnation depending on the input. Tiny daily relationship investments. A quick text showing care, a few minutes of active listening, a brief word of encouragement, reliably growing and deepening over months and years into profound, resilient connection and mutual support, or conversely, the consistent absence of these small acts, compounding into eventual isolation and disconnection. This essential habit infrastructure, the unconscious or conscious architecture of your repeated daily behaviors, does not announce its trajectory-determining influence loudly or dramatically. It operates quietly, subtly, relentlessly, consistently, predictably accumulating small results day by day, year after year, faithfully carrying you inevitably and powerfully towards a long-term destination. A particular kind of health, a level of skill, a quality of relationship and income bracket, all while your conscious attention often remains focused on more immediate concerns, external events, or moments of dramatic decision-making. What initially appears in the short term as merely insignificant routines, small behaviors that don't seem to make a big difference today, eventually undeniably reveals itself over the long term as the powerful, consistent architect of your destiny and your identity. Those who consciously understand, embrace, and master the art and practice of deliberate habit design and optimization discover a profoundly transformative, almost unfair truth about predictable achievement. They realize they fundamentally do not need to rely solely on constant, fickle motivation, that often unreliable source of energy, or exhausting willpower, that finite resource, to move towards their goals. Why? Because they have deliberately, intelligently developed and installed powerful automated behavioral systems, well-designed habits and routines that naturally, predictably, and reliably deliver their desired outcomes, make consistent progress inevitable, often without conscious effort or reliance on transient feelings or internal force. Why do habits, those repeated sequences of behavior, wield this extraordinary, powerful, destiny-determining influence, functioning as silent guides to your future? Because life, fundamentally at its core, follows the principle of compound interest, applied not just to financial capital, but to your behavioral capital. Small, consistent actions performed repeatedly over time, whether positive or negative, inevitably and reliably produce dramatically, exponentially different long-term results than infrequent, inconsistent, large efforts. The small difference today becomes a huge difference tomorrow. Rigorous historical analysis of exceptional achievers across diverse fields and different eras, those who sustained high performance and significant impact, reliably reveals not necessarily inherent heroic willpower that others lacked in moments of crisis, but instead a striking, predictable pattern of deliberate, strategic habit architecture. Intentionally designed systems of daily routines, rituals, and repeatable behaviors that ensured consistent input and reliable progress. Your consciously designed or passively accepted daily habits and underlying routines reliably determine which crucial skills, relationships, and areas of potential in your life receive dedicated compounding investment and growth over time. They dictate which key relationships automatically enjoy consistent attention, care, and nurturing, deepening bonds naturally. They fundamentally determine which opportunities, connections, or states of preparation become consistently accessible to you over time through the reliable pathway of established routine and disciplined readiness, opening doors. And ultimately, through the aggregated effect of these countless small, repeated behaviors, your established habits fundamentally and reliably predict what kind of person you inevitably become. Your character, your competence, your identity, because you are simply practicing being that person daily. When you consciously recognize and deeply embrace that deliberate habit, functions not merely as a strategy for efficiency or comfort, not just a mere convenience, but instead reliably operates as the powerful engine of automated destiny. Steering your outcomes without conscious thought, once established, suddenly consciously engaging in purposeful habit design and diligent routine. Building transforms from appearing as an optional personal improvement, something merely suggested by self-help gurus, into an absolutely essential foundational requirement for conscious life navigation, reliable achievement, and actively building the future you desire. Most significantly, cultivating deep habit mastery effectively prevents momentary desires, unpredictable external distractions, fleeting urges, or transient emotional fluctuations. Wanting junk food, now procrastinating a crucial task, scrolling endlessly. From unilaterally disrupting, hijacking, or ultimately derailing your fundamental long-term trajectory towards your highest aspirations. This happens by consciously establishing robust, predetermined automated behavioral systems and processes that reliably initiate and sustain purposeful action that is explicitly aligned with your ultimate objectives, making that action happen automatically and effectively independent of what you happen to feel in the moment. The habit is the action taker. So how do you deliberately design, install, and actively reinforce powerful, positive, and consistent habits? Those subtle but powerful navigators. Strong and reliable enough to predictably deliver you to your most desired destination, to transform your potential into tangible results, even when motivation fades or challenges arise. Begin by conducting a thorough, honest habit audit of your life right now. Honestly, identify which existing dominant routines, behaviors you perform regularly, are currently and demonstrably carrying you towards your ultimate objective, accelerating your progress, and which conversely are actively subtly carrying you away from your ultimate objective, creating friction delay or negative compounding effects. Make the invisible influence of habit visible. Practice powerful habit stacking as a primary strategy. Actively link and anchor new desired habit patterns, small targeted easy-to-start behaviors you wish to adopt by intentionally attaching them to existing already established automated routine sequences that you perform reliably each day, e.g. After I make my coffee, existing habit, I will read one page of my book, new habit. Leverage the momentum of established routines. Establish clear specific implementation intentions, precise pre-planned commitments that explicitly specify precisely when, where, and under what circumstances a key desired habit will be executed, removing ambiguity, minimizing friction, and creating strong environmental cues that signal the habit should begin actively bypassing the need for conscious deliberation or wrestling with procrastination in the moment of truth. Know the exact trigger and response. Actively engineer your key physical environment and strategically prune your social circles to make initiating and maintaining positive, disciplined habits and desired behaviors significantly easier, more natural, and require less conscious willpower or reliance on self-control than initiating or defaulting to negative, distracting, or unproductive alternatives. Make the desired behavior the path of least resistance through smart design. Remember yet again that habit muscles, the capacity for forming, maintaining, and leveraging beneficial routines, precisely like physical ones, gain significant strength, reliability, and automaticity only through consistent intentional engagement with a small but meaningful repetition, regularly performing the behavior, not through occasional maximal or unsustainable heroic efforts. Consistency trumps intensity over time. Actively feed and elevate the quality, intentionality, and effectiveness of your habit architecture by deeply studying and modeling how history's most consequential, most consistently productive, and most profoundly impactful contributors, individuals who achieved sustained excellence and shaped the world, systematically and masterfully structured their fundamental daily routines and intentional behavioral choices in ways that virtually undeniably guaranteed their eventual, predictable, and often revolutionary success regardless of fluctuating motivation levels or encountering external resistance. The story of Margaret Hamilton used again for emphasis, this time focusing distinctly on habit design for reliability rather than just discipline. While many of her equally brilliant computer scientist contemporaries approached their incredibly complex and demanding work on crucial software systems inconsistently, often driven solely by last-minute adrenaline spikes based on looming deadlines or unpredictable moments of inspiration, she in stark contrast maintained an extraordinary, almost unprecedented, routine discipline and conscious habit design approach that directly and uniquely produced unparalleled levels of software reliability. Error rates orders of magnitude lower than industry norms, critical for the success of the Apollo program, which had human lives at stake. When prevailing industry standards actually accepted and accounted for the seemingly inevitable presence of a high volume of errors and bugs in complex software systems, almost normalizing coding mistakes as part of the process, when intense project deadline pressure aggressively encouraged developers to take rushed procedural shortcuts, prioritizing speed over meticulous quality control when engaging in exhausting, unsystematic, overnight coding marathons were culturally admired and presented as defining heroic acts of dedication, signaling commitment through visible struggle. Her underlying habit architecture, her design system of consistent detail-oriented routines, checks and balances, operated fundamentally quietly and reliably differently from the norm. This unparalleled reliability was not achieved primarily through some impossible superhuman level of innate, sustained conscious self-discipline, battling chaotic conditions, but specifically through the intentional design and consistent adherence to systematized action patterns, precise repeatable procedures, built-in review processes, and unwavering daily routines, specific sequences of behaviors and checks that continued functioning, continued ensuring quality, Regardless of fluctuating emotional states, transient motivational highs or lows, or external pressures to compromise. Her mastery of leveraging habit design for reliability and intentional outcome was not about showcasing charismatic personality traits or external heroism. It was profoundly about deliberate process design, architecting reliable systems of behavior that automatically executed necessary tasks and checks, which eventually yielded the extraordinary life-critical reliability of the software controlling vital systems like the Apollo lunar module, a reliability level that simply would have remained undiscovered or deemed theoretically impossible to achieve in a human system had she allowed emotional variation, motivational fluctuations, or external pressures to dictate the necessary mundane but critical consistency of foundational repeated development habits. Are you currently perhaps subtly treating desired success, mastering a skill, building wealth, improving relationships, or achieving health goals as fundamentally dependent on luck, inherent talent, finding sufficient motivation, or needing moments of unpredictable inspiration? Entities that often feel outside your control, rather than actively recognizing them as the predictable, designable outcomes of conscious habit installation and dedicated process architecture that is fundamentally available to anyone willing to build it. What remarkable tangible achievements, what concrete steps forward towards your deepest desires might immediately materialize and become physically evident in your life if you deliberately redirected your significant conscious focus and energy away from endlessly trying to manufacture or force motivation, a notoriously fleeting resource, and consciously directed that energy instead towards the quiet, consistent, powerful work of designing and relentlessly building solid action architecture. Reliable systems of key habits that simply execute necessary tasks regardless of feeling. Could your greatest current unfulfilled aspirations, those significant goals that consistently feel just out of comfortable reach, actually fundamentally reflect an habit insufficiency or a lack of consistent, purposeful underlying routines and foundational behaviors aligned with those goals, rather than accurately reflecting some perceived inherent capability limitation, external obstacle, or talent gap you currently believe yourself to possess? Might your most meaningful accomplishments, your significant transformations, the achievement of your deepest desires be patiently awaiting you, fully attainable just beyond those current habit barriers? Those moments where you instinctively yield to distraction, choose immediate comfort over necessary effort, or fail to execute consistent, aligned routines, barriers that currently register in your perception as elusive inspiration deficits, uncontrollable procrastination, or lack of willpower, when in reality they are simply invitations awaiting the intentional design and installation of more effective habits. Consider this fundamental, powerful reframing. Perhaps success, profound impact, skill mastery, and meaningful achievement consistently appear distant, elusive, or unnecessarily difficult to attain, not primarily because you fundamentally lack necessary innate qualities, raw talents, resources, or favorable circumstances compared to others, but significantly because you have profoundly critically underestimated how thoroughly, reliably, and powerfully discipline expressed most effectively and reliably through consistent habit ultimately determines which underlying qualities, talents, potentials, and resources you do possess are actually activated, utilized, honed, expressed, and reliably converted into high-level, repeatable performance, tangible results, and predictable progress. The profound truth remains that inherent talents, innate qualities, potential abilities, and external circumstances, while they may provide a starting point or unique advantage, ultimately only significantly influence your maximum achievement potential and your speed of progress up to a certain limited point, only when and to the extent that conscious, strategic discipline operating most reliably and effectively through intentionally designed habits consistently, tirelessly, and automatically converts that potential into predictable, repeatable, high-quality performance, consistent positive action, tangible results, and powerful momentum over the long term, navigating predictably towards your desired future state. Your powerful journey towards intentional dream manifestation, profound achievement, and shaping your ultimate destiny begins decisively and fundamentally with conscious, intentional, disciplined habit installation and unwavering consistency in executing those essential small daily actions that compound relentlessly.